I call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the October 7th, 2025 business meeting of your Ashland City Council. Councillor Bloom will offer the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor. We acknowledge and honor the Aboriginal people on whose ancestral homelands we work, the Kirakutsum Band of the Shasta Nation, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. We honor the first stewards in the Rogue Valley and the lands we love and depend on. Tribes with ancestral lands in and surrounding the geography of the Ashland watershed include the original past, present, and future Indigenous inhabitants of the Shasta, Takelma, and Athabascan people. We also recognize and acknowledge the Shasta village of Quakaka, where the crow lights. That is now the Ashland City Plaza.
Thank you. And Councillor Kaplan will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Alyssa.
Sherrill.
Here.
Dale.
Here.
Bloom.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Kaplan.
Here.
Duquesne.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Thank you. We are to Mayor's announcements. The first is that I want to make sure that everyone who has come here this evening to speak with the council knows how to sign up. We have forms on the back wall there. You'll fill it out, a speaker request form. Make sure that you indicate on the form if you are here to speak to a specific agenda item by writing that agenda item down. If you're here to speak with us about something that is not on the agenda, please indicate that in the public forum section. Then please put it in the tray right here and our recorder will take it and make sure that we receive it up here at the right time so that we can call you forward when it is appropriate for you to come and speak to the council. I have a proclamation today for Indigenous Peoples Day 2025. Whereas the United States announced support for the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples on December 16th, 2010, and whereas we recognize that Indigenous people have suffered from historic injustices as a result of their colonization and the dispossession of their lands, territories, and resources. And whereas we recognize that Ashland is built on the ancestral homeland of the Kirakutsum Band of the Shasta Nation, and we honor the Takelma, Athabascan, and Shasta tribes with ancestral lands in and surrounding the geography of the Ashland watershed. And whereas Indigenous people were forcibly removed from ancestral lands, displaced, assimilated, and banned from worshiping or performing many sacred ceremonies, and yet they remain as a visible testimony to their individual and collective resilience. And whereas we recognize the value of many contributions made to our community through Indigenous people's knowledge, labor, spirituality, philosophy, arts, and cultural contributions. And whereas we have a responsibility to oppose systemic racism towards Indigenous peoples, which perpetuates income inequality and less access to health, education, and social stability. And whereas on Indigenous Peoples Day, we celebrate Indigenous history and honor Native Americans for their role in shaping the contours of this country. Now, therefore, I, Tanya Graham, Mayor of the City of Ashland, Oregon, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim October 13th, 2025 as Indigenous Peoples Day and call upon the people of Ashland to observe this day with appropriate reflection and learning and to continue our efforts to create a more just and equitable community. In Ashland, we are better together. We are now to approval of minutes. Would any counselor, does any counselor have corrections to the minutes? Okay, the floor is open for a motion to accept the minutes. Councillor Bloom.
Yeah, I move to accept the minutes of September 15th and September 16th.
Second.
Roll call, please. Alyssa?
Sherrill.
Yes.
Dale.
Yes.
Bloom.
Yes.
Kaplan.
Yes.
Duquesne.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
And we are now to the consent agenda. Would any counselor like to remove any item from the consent agenda? The floor is open for a motion regarding the consent agenda. Councillor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the consent agenda as listed.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Bloom.
Yes.
Dale.
Yes.
Sherrill.
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Duquesne.
Yes.
Kaplan.
Yes.
Councillor Hanson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to thank the appointments, Jay Linninger, Thor Morris, and Jay Bowen. We've had a chance to work with Mr. Morris, who was attending the Transportation Advisory Committee, and we're excited to get him on board, and we appreciate all the committee appointments. So thank you for your service, everybody.
Absolutely. Okay, so we are to special presentations. We have a finance update for the fourth quarter fiscal year 25 preliminary results. Sabrina?
Yeah, so Interim Director Bryn Morrison is here tonight to go through this report. So we're going to go through this, but just as a reminder, we are in the process of our audit, so we haven't closed the books for last fiscal year. We're also going to give an update on some activity regarding utility billing and delinquent accounts and their impact on the fund balance. And then some of these items we're going to kind of touch on tonight, we're going to discuss further during our council retreat on December 1st. So, thanks, Bryn. Alyssa, can you turn the screens on?
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. Bryn Morrison, Interim Finance Director. So as Sabrina mentioned, we're going to go through the fourth quarter and the utility billing portion of how our allowance for doubtful accounts and our delinquent collections has impacted the fourth quarter. We're going to go through that tonight. So first of all, this is the revenue summary, which is showing the comparison of previous years. The charges for services you'll see there, sorry, it's not very dark, is actually on page 32 of your report that's in your packet. This is the revenue summary in your packet, and it shows that the charges for services is less than the previous year, and we'll address that later as part of the impact of the delinquent accounts and the allowance for doubtful accounts. Overall, the charges for services would have increased 4%, but with the doubtful accounts, it is less than the previous year, as you can see. And overall, citywide revenue is down 3.3%. TLT, which is our transient lodging tax, is up 10.1% from the previous year. Food and beverage tax is showing down right now 6.2%. However, we do contract with a third-party provider who we have asked to audit because we are coming in approximately $300,000 less than what we had anticipated. So they are performing an audit for us right now. We should have the results of that for the retreat in December so we can have a good understanding of where those providers have fallen short, if it is, people that are new to the area that are not understanding how to report, or if it truly is because of an economic situation to where the business has slowed down. So planning and building fees are 26% lower than the previous year, and that's due to less activity, and staff will be monitoring that going forward. Investment income remains high, which is great. We appreciate that, and we are actively looking into investments with the funds that we have available to try to maintain that high level of income. Franchise fee revenue has increased by 7.6%, and that's primarily due to this being the first year that AFN paid into the franchise fee. So that's why there is that large increase there. So now we'll talk about the allowance for doubtful accounts. And just as an update, we are right now on very good track with processing current utility accounts. What we're going to speak of next is accounts that were closed. They are not active customers. So just a timeline, just to remind council and the citizens, in March 2020, the city postponed delinquent processing due to COVID per the governor's executive orders. In July 2020, we then resumed it, but unfortunately then the Alameda fire happened, and so we decided to delay it for the well-being of the community then. October 2020, we started delinquent processing again, but it was really only to alert customers of their past due balances as well as the wealth of resources out in the assistance agencies and asking them to apply for assistance for help with those utility bills. There was a lot of federal funding that came through that increased the amounts that our partners were able to pledge for utility customers. In March 2022, we decided to resume delinquent processing and disconnection. That went through August of may, when unfortunately due to a large staff turnover and utility billing, we had to postpone once again. In May of 2024, we resumed the delinquent processing and disconnection and offered extended payment plans. These were payment plans that we had not offered before, longer term for higher dollar amounts, recognizing that folks were in more debt than we had seen in the past. Excuse me. In July 2025, we postponed delinquent processing due to staff turnover, and we just recently started again. We have a full staff in utility billing now, so they are pursuing processing now. So, at the end of June 2025, the total amount owed on utility accounts was approximately $6.8 million, and that includes current customers as well, that the 0 to 30 days. So that is our total was our total receivable amount. And what we did was we contacted roughly 1,200 customers by mail, letting them know beginning in July that the city was pursuing those delinquent accounts and that they would need to be paid in full by August in order to not be sent to a collection agency. We had very good turnout for folks that paid and also that got put onto payment plans. So the amount, once that August time period came, it was roughly the middle of August, we prepared to send to collection was $2.7 million. And of that, here's a listing of the funds that it impacts. And the general fund, just as a reminder, the electric users tax goes into the general fund. So that's why there's that $309,000 there. The street fund for the utility fee, water fund, wastewater, stormwater, electric, and telecommunications. The electric fund is the highest because we have the most electric customers in town. We are a college town, so there are many accounts that are truly only electric. They don't have water. The landlords pay for the water. So that's why you see the significant amount in the electric fund. One of the things that we have done through our collection agency partner is we have entered into an agreement with the Department of Revenue, where we will be sending our customers to them and they will garnish their taxes. If they are to receive a return on their taxes, they will garnish it and they will send us the money instead for a small fee. So that is a new partnership that we have entered into, which I'm hoping is helpful. This $2.7 million write-off is a one-time large cleanup of the last several years. This will not happen again. We will get back into our normal yearly process of writing off accounts to collections, which will be much less because we're actively pursuing delinquent processing now as well. They will not get this high any longer. This was actually brought to the auditor's attention last year with the intention to rectify it in fiscal year 25. So when we look at the packet that is in front of you, you'll see the large decrease in these fund balances because of writing off these accounts to the collection. So the schedule of budgetary compliance is presented on page 30 and 31 of your packet, and you'll see that each fund is in budgetary compliance. Capital spending and debt service are the two that are shown as a small percentage of the budget, and that's just due to delays in capital projects and the debt service that would be needed for those. This is a look at our revenues versus expenditures of our enterprise funds. in total, and I'll show you the major funds broken up in a moment here. But these funds are balanced through our cost of service studies and our master plans to ensure that the funding sources are appropriate and the expenditures are appropriate for these funds. This is the water fund. The darker blue is the revenue, lighter blue is the expense. Excuse me, electric fund. Thank you. This is the water fund. The wastewater fund. And this brings us to how the general fund looks. So again, the revenue is the darker color of the two. Sorry, I should have made that a little more bold to stand out. What we're noticing is that we had a larger fund balance carry forward from the COVID years, and also due to increased grant funding and lower personnel services costs that we have been able to use carrying us forward into this most recent budget that you all adopted. This is not going to be the case going forward. This is going to have to be a topic of discussion at the retreat coming up, is how we look at how we've used our ending fund balance and our carry forward to carry us through to this point. So the city's net position. So there was a calculation error on the first page of the packet. It has been corrected. It was just the percentage was unfortunately pulling from a different spreadsheet within our master file. There's no change to the actual totals, but it has been corrected and will be updated in the minutes. So the preliminary fund balance of the city has dropped to 3.9 from the previous year, and that is due to those doubtful accounts, going from 89.1 to 85.2. General fund, 17.1 to 15.4. Electric fund, the 9.4 million to 7.6 million. And again, the electric fund was the majority of those write-offs. So citywide cash and investments have increased approximately $600,000. And one thing to point out is the difference between cash and investments and the fund balance. Because we're on an accrual basis, the fund balance is different than the cash balance, because the fund balance takes into consideration items that we have billed for, but not necessarily received. The cash balance is the actual cash that we have received. The reports that we have available for our financials, OpenGov is our interactive financial reporting tool that's on the city's website, and it has a few different reports on it that can be used. The annual report is updated nightly. It's linked directly to our financial system. And it was brought to our attention, thank you very much for those that brought it to our attention, that the fiscal year 26 one was not updating, and that has been corrected. So it is now updating each night. So the monthly data and the year-over-year data, that is something that we update monthly. We close the books within the first 10 working days of the month, and then our accountants prepare the financial statements, and then those are updated in OpenGov as well as they're prepared, and the PDF version, the summary by funds, is then put on the city's website. So the monthly financial statements that are on the website, different from OpenGov, the preliminary June 2025 one is up on the city website, and that's as of August 11th. The one that is in the packet is the most recent one that was done in September. And the reason for that difference is because what you have in front of you is our work through our audit process. And part of our audit process was the reconciliation of those delinquent accounts. So you will not see another June financial report on the city website until the audit is complete. Speaking of the audit, on-site field work begins October 13th. It typically takes 2 weeks for the auditors to inquire more deeply into the books and run their sample assessments. The audit committee will meet in November, early December, and we would love anyone who is interested to please apply for the audit committee. It is a yearly term. So those that were on the audit committee last year, it expired December 31st. And then the report from the auditors to the city council is scheduled December 16th. Some updates from the finance department with the deputy city manager. Grateful for her help. She's helping us with the RFP for the utility billing software. That's exciting news for us, and working closely with our human resources department on the implementation of the new payroll software. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Brent. I really appreciate that. That was very helpful. I think I might have just gotten my question answered on the last slide, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and this might have Sabrina jump in here. But several slides back, you had talked about the delinquency being paused because we had staff turnover, and so and it happened twice in 2 years, and I get it. I think it was even more than that. Turnover happens. My question was, and I can kind of reading it here, what steps are we taking to protect our utilities, our ratepayers, both current and those that are right there on the bubble, because we know the farther you get behind, and it's tougher to catch up. Of course, it's exponentially harder. But this is kind of a self-inflicted wound, right? So I guess the answer is going to be probably in large part these software updates. Can you speak to maybe a timeline when council would be able to see the RFP and just a rough timeline to when we would see this?
Yeah, so I think our intent is to issue the RFP before the end of the year. We'll select the software, and then we'll implement within the first 6 months of next year. It's on our best interest to do it as quickly as possible, just like the payroll software. And I think, it was a self-inflicted wound of trying to streamline and use our financial software kind of in all ways. And it was kind of, round peg, square hole situation with our Munis software. So, our hope is with the new software is we have an easier process on our end, but also an easier user experience for our customers.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councilor Kaplan?
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks so much, Brenda, for making, a lot of my questions you've answered during the course of the presentation. I really appreciate the work you've done to get the interactive financing, interactive reports from open.gov back up and running, because I really rely on those. I have another question about utility billing that I think it certainly will be a great help once it is done. There are many people or some people anyway, who like or frequently need to go into your office and talk to a real live person, not just on the phone even, or not just by email, but see somebody face to face. I know that's been a challenge as well. And I do office hours down at City Hall, and invariably there's somebody that comes by there and they're looking for utility billing, even though it hasn't been open there for 5 years.
Right.
What is the vision going forward for providing that level of service? I know it's greater service than a Vista, or for those who are in Pepco, outside of Ashland, they can't go to an office, but we're a municipality, and some people, do value that as a municipal service, and it's maybe the only face-to-face interaction they have with a City of Ashland employee, unless there's, something going on there with the power going down or something on the street. Can you talk to us about what you see going forward on that capacity?
Sure. So right now, in-person hours are Tuesdays and Fridays from 9 to 1. And I'll be honest, probably maybe 7 to 10 people come each time. And it really depends on how we're able to progress with this new software also, to identify what the needs are. We most definitely will require a more user-friendly online portal for customers to be able to access and pay their bills. Absolutely, that's one of the most severe challenges we have right now with the current software. So we'll just have to assess what the needs of the community are, what the software is able to provide, and moving forward, see how we accomplish whatever goals we have to help and not hinder the public.
So 2 days a week, 4 hours at a time.
Correct.
You see that continuing with those hours, at least for the near future. Hopefully, you'll see demand for that going down from the 7 to 10 that you see each time. Maybe as the software gets upgraded,
Right.
you won't even need it.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Sherrill?
Thank you so much for the report. Question, kind of a two-part related to the rears. So just doing a little bit of quick math, would you say it's approximately $2,000 to $3,000 that these individuals are behind?
Honestly, it really, it varies. We
Okay.
have some that are quite a bit higher than that.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
And then the follow-up question to that is, when we adopt this new partnership with the contractor that's going to be potentially garnishing tax returns, is there a way for community members right now, working families that are really depending on that money, that already have a long-term payment plan set up that you spoke of, can they stay on that?
Yes, if they're on a payment plan and adhere to the payment plan, they will not go to collection. Therefore,
is-
they would not go to the Department of Revenue.
Okay. And do we have a really good public outreach campaign ready to make sure all 1,200 of those people know that if they don't have a plan by said date, they're going to expect to have that money garnished, so they can have basically a heads up that you're not going to get your tax return and your kids might not be getting shoes?
So this is a new partnership, and the process of notifying customers about their closed delinquent accounts started over a year ago we are required by law to send letters to all of them and to let them know the fee that would be associated with their accounts going to a collection agency. Then, again, we did the process again to those 1,200 roughly customers, sending them their letter again by law. And we had, we can only reach out to the known addresses we have, unfortunately. And then now the collection agency, they will work with the customers also and put them on payment plans. So it is truly those that are non-responsive, completely non-responsive, that would go to the Department of Revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hanson?
Thank you. Thank you, Bryn. Glad to see all the numbers, and most of them, a lot of them are optimistic for me. Seeing TLT up 10% is great, but one that concerns me is the down number from planning and building. And I'm wondering, this is just a quarterly snapshot, but do you have access to show or give us a general idea what it's like over the last 3 or 4 quarters? Are we, is it a downward trend, or are we just experiencing just kind of a slowdown in this last 3 months?
To my understanding, is in working with Director Goldman, we are monitoring it closely, and is just a slowdown in recent times. It's not been a deep dive by any means. So that's why we're going to watch it, and this next quarterly report will have a better idea, and also, look at the activity and see what specifically may be causing it, and we can bring it back.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, obviously the big concern, of course, is our revenue shortfall, and I know we're going to talk about that at the retreat. And this council has been asking for projections, and that doesn't just happen overnight. And I know that finance department's working on it, but I'm curious if you think that's information that'll be available at our retreat, or do you have any update on and looking forward for our financial projections?
So we're working on projections for the retreat. I think, when we're thinking about building and planning, there's always the wider context and, how individuals are feeling in terms of security with everything that's going on before you're, expending a lot of money on development and building. And so, we'll be doing our forecasting with kind of a wide best case, worst case scenario.
Yeah.
For
Great.
several things, because there is impacts outside of our control that we're going to have to kind of reconcile and understand when we're thinking about the future. So right now, I think across the country, consumers don't have a lot of confidence, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and so that's never a good time typically for, building, quite frankly.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on that, we wondered at the beginning of the summer whether we're going to have a downturn tourist season. And it seems as though from the TLT evidence that we're up, and continue to monitor that and look forward to the next update. But thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So just a quick note on that. While it's up, rates have also risen. So the cost of staying has increased. And so that's going to naturally increase the amount of revenue we're seeing. So sometimes just looking at the dollar amounts coming in isn't going to tell the full picture of, number of tourists visiting. So I think we need to get some of that wider context in our discussion about what's going on that's not just revenue numbers.
Thank you. Great point. Do we know what our F&B, food and beverage tax yield has been this last quarter?
So this is the one that we are having audited right now because it's coming in roughly $300,000 less than we expected.
Right, you said that. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Duquesne?
Mayor. Thanks, Bryn. A couple of quick questions about the F&B. It is lower, and you mentioned a third-party audit. Who is that third party?
So we contract with a company called HDL, who does our collection and our administration of our business licenses and our food and beverage tax. So they, as part of their contract, they will audit for us upon our request or upon if they notice that providers are not complying.
And something that was brought up about the planning and building being down, and it's just something that's happening right now. I see that SDCs are down also. Do you think it's because of the building and the planning?
So SDC fees are related to development, and so if development's down, we'll automatically see those
That'll
fees
go
reduced
down
as well.
too.
They're kind of tied.
And something quickly, last one, I see that the property tax, also looking at this, I see the expenditures exceed the property tax, and you kind of touched on that, Bryn. And as we go into December the 1st, when we go into our finance meeting, I believe this is, as we project, that was brought up earlier, this is a time I think that we should really dig in deep, because when expenditures exceed, I don't feel like now is the time to raise property tax. I feel like now is the time to stop spending. So I look forward to that being a part of our meeting when we meet on December the 1st, and thank you for your numbers.
Councillor Dale? Excuse me, everyone. Just a reminder that if you've come in to join us this evening, there is no clapping, there's no noise making from the audience. We can see you. We'll give you many opportunities to come up and speak to us, but we need to be able to have the quiet we need to do our deliberations.
Mayor, if I could just for a second about the property tax.
Yes.
So we receive the maximum amount of property tax we can receive legally. So there is no raising the property tax. So this is an important point as we head into those discussions, is that, our expenditures must meet our revenue. And so we are maxed out on property tax. So we legally could not raise that.
Exactly.
And just a quick follow-up to that is in terms of the numbers related to property tax, does that have anything to do with the cash flow reality that we receive our taxes at the end of the year and then over the course of the year we spend them down?
The total for the property taxes within your statement is the total for the fiscal year. So whatever we have in total for that fiscal year, that's what the revenue that has come in.
Right.
Am I answering?
Yeah, I was just, to Councillor Duquesne's question, I know there's often a question because property taxes don't come in the quarter in which they're drawn down. And so sometimes that can appear to be a problem, but we receive all of them essentially, or the vast majority of them in the last quarter of the calendar year.
Correct.
Okay, great. Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. So this question is going back to what Councilor Hansen had previously brought up about the downturn in our building development fees, so forth. And this might need a head nod from Director Goldman in the back here, but I hesitate to jump to the general conclusion that it might just be uncertainty or and other external factors that are kind of at a kind of a 30,000-foot high level. I think it would be prudent to, hopefully we are interested in engaging external stakeholders, builders, developers, real estate lending, local insurance companies to find out exactly why. Is it in fact these general market conditions? What is specific to Ashland? Is that something that we are going to look into as part of this process? Because again, it goes back to, is there any significant difference between what we're doing versus what we're seeing in the valley or market conditions overall? And what can we do to appropriately possibly adjust that this council could consider? So I guess that's a statement and a question. I'm hoping that we will be doing that. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kaplan.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of questions of clarification, really, about timeframes. This is a quarterly report. It's a backward looking, and I've heard several comments or questions that talked about trends or what we're seeing. So, in terms of the building and planning fees, I understand that that was a number that you presented in your report that was based on the total fiscal year. It's the end of June, but it's the entire fiscal year of 24-25. Mm-hmm. It is not what we've seen. Well, it may be continued in July, August, September, which is the first quarter of this fiscal year. But your comment was really about the entire fiscal year, not even really necessarily about the last quarter of the fiscal year, although you may have the detail to know whether there was a trend down into that last quarter. Is that right?
We'll have to look into it. Like I said, we're monitoring it. Unfortunately, I don't know offhand from quarter to quarter what the specifics would be. We'd have to look into that further, but we are monitoring it.
Okay, great. And then all of the other information that we've been seeing is also for the fiscal year that ended June 30th. So we're now, usually we see this quarterly report just a little bit earlier than this. It's not tremendously late. We would see it, kind of towards the end of the following quarter. But we've actually now had a whole quarter in between this report and what we're being reported on. So I think it's just, as we look at these numbers, it's important to keep in mind that there's a lot of experience going on, including the food and beverage tax, including the tourist tax. These are numbers as of June 30th. There was a bit of summer after June 30th. Mm-hmm. And I'd be curious to see what the results were there, but that's not what you're reporting today.
Correct. So what I'm reporting today is as of September also, because it does include some of the audited numbers. Yes. So working through some of the audit numbers, but it truly did go back to last fiscal year. But if we would have brought this report, say for instance, the beginning of August, it would not have the doubtful accounts within it.
Sure, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So again, timing, it is helpful to understand the timing of it, like you mentioned.
The numbers on tourist tax and food and beverage, that was updated in the course of the audit, so that's update for the numbers that you provided? Or?
We are actually waiting on TLT right now, but they are very close. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because we don't receive the funding from the state of Oregon or from HDL because of when the due dates are and when they have to process and then release the funding to us.
Sure, there's always a lag. Okay, thanks a lot, Bryn.
Yeah.
Councillor Hanson.
I don't want to belabor this, but in the packet, it says we're looking at Q4, April to June. And I think Councillor Kaplan was asking, is this the whole fiscal year to date, or is this just Q4?
It's the whole fiscal year.
To date.
So the revenue summary, for example, does not have a month column. It just has the grand total column for the fiscal year. So it truly is the full fiscal year.
Right. Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions back to the utility accounts, and just so that our people who are watching understand, these write-offs are for people who fell behind in their accounts and then moved. These are not people who are still in town at their residence.
Correct.
And then can you tell me what is a typical electric billing? And I know it'll change in the heat of the summer and in the cold of the winter, but you gave us the number of 6.8 million total owed, but that included the 0 to 30 days. So those are the people who are up to date on their billing. And then we did a write-off of 2.7 million. So what would we have expected when we did that report? What would we have can you tell me how much of that was the people who were in the 0 to 30 space?
No, none. None in 0 to 30.
And out of that 6.8 million total?
Oh, of the 6 point, okay. It would be roughly 2.3 million is what we bill each month.
And so we were able to chase down almost 2 million of that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. And then I also understand, and just confirm this for me if you would, that we have not done any write-offs for 5 years. Is that correct?
We did
Or we did some interim?
a small amount, yes. Just
So
a small
do we have a way of projecting what would have been a typical write-off over that 5-year time frame, and how different? I know it's all coming at once.
Right.
But are we able to see how different this is than what we would have normally just done if we accrued them year over year?
Right. So going back to 2019, the electric fund would be between $25,000 and $50,000, for example. It wouldn't be this high at all. So the electric fund would be the largest one.
So typically in the $25,000 to $50,000 a year.
$25,000 to $50,000 a year.
So we're still easily $1 million at the high level if we do that quick math. 5 times 50. No. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, so it's even more. It's more like 1.3 or 1.4. So what I'm trying to get to is that I think all of those decisions, and I remember when staff was coming in front of us and we were saying there's so much assistance out there that we don't want to cut people off. We don't want them to be without electricity when they can go and get help and get paid and get caught up. And so I think all of that makes good sense for us to understand kind of how we got here. But our current delinquent process is back to normal with people. If they don't come in and make arrangements, then we have the typical disconnection process underway now.
Correct.
Just to
Yes.
confirm for the
Yes.
public. And then the Parks Monthly Report, there have been some questions for us about that. That's now available from the open.gov reports that are posted.
Yes.
So anyone who has been looking for those Parks monthly reports can now find those now that they're being updated.
Correct. Any of the reports on OpenGov, the annual ones, the saved views are very helpful. There's a variety of different saved views: food and beverage, transient lodging tax, overtime, for example. There's many different saved views that when somebody goes to our website and accesses that, they don't have to do any filtering. Those are already saved there, and they can just click on it. They don't have to log in or anything like that.
Great, thank you. Last question is about the audit committee. So if they're going to start meeting in November or early December, when it would seem that we should be appointing those members at the first meeting of November. Is that correct?
That's the plan.
All right. So so for anyone here or in TV land, if you are interested in being on the audit committee, I would say we should have your application within the next 2 weeks, and we have that available on the website. Okay, great. Thank you. Any further questions of staff? Thank you so much for the report.
Thank you.
We are now to public forum. We have 7 people who have signed up for public forum. So each person will get 2 minutes. You'll speak to the council from the podium to my right. Please, when you're there, say your name and the city in which you reside, and then you will have 2 minutes. The timer is here, and you'll also have a visual signal with the little box that's on the podium. When it is green, you are in good shape to keep going. When it goes to yellow, you have 20 seconds left, and then and you'll hear a buzz. And then when you are out of time, it will go to red, and you'll hear another buzz. When you get to that red light, please finish the sentence that you're on so we can move on to the next person who has come here to speak to us this evening. The first 3 people we have signed up are Teresa Riley, Letta Shapiro, and Clarinda Maripin. Teresa Riley? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm Teresa Riley. I'm a resident of Ashland. I want to convince the City Council to end the night camping for the homeless and therefore the day camping in Ashland and our parks and our libraries, because I believe this is not a passive problem or issue anymore, because I've just recently come across, they're now day camping in Garfield Park. They're 18, 20 years old. They're doing drugs. They're doing meth on the bike path right next to California Street. They're partying with out-of-towners who are deep into drugs. They're right next to the bike path 5 days a week, where approximate 50 children go to and from school who are unaccompanied by parents. So they're less than 20 feet from these people. I was in '62, I was almost kidnapped as a 5-year-old by a pedophile. So I'm well aware of how things can happen. I believe this is a very serious danger, kidnapping, trafficking. I worked at Access. I helped this 15-year-old who had to leave her violent home, ended up in a homeless camp. She got kidnapped and trafficked, and she had escaped, and I'm trying to get her benefits. So then you have the possibility of selling drugs to these children, ruining their lives, early death in 10 years. Ruining their families, bringing heavy drugs into our community, who is a positive, life-affirming community that's trying to stay in balance and thrive. I don't think we have the facilities to take care of these people. We don't even have a day shelter. Portland had investors come in and build huge buildings, and which had a AA meeting, therapy, and pharmacy in the bottom of the building, and then they got a ton of homeless coming in trying to get that housing. I think we need to let these people not stay here. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Lita Shapiro from Ashland. Council, Mayor, in the past few months, there has been much talk online about fiscal responsibility and a sustainable budget. I'm here to speak to a couple of specific issues concerning the City of Ashland's financial management policies already in place but not being followed. First, which I've mentioned before, the fund balance policy states that the city will budget a contingency appropriation to provide for unanticipated non-recurring expenses. The minimum contingency is to be maintained at not less than 3% of the average operating expenses from the past 3 years. Yet, as a report of August 17th said, the balance did not meet the requirement. While the funds might be replaced, the fact that the finance department has not been aware of something as basic as keeping the required balances is as appalling as it is concerning. Second, the City of Ashland states in its objectives that there is no employment discrimination. In a very real way, the hiring process affects the development of the budget. And the City of Ashland discriminates in the hiring process by not doing a search for the best qualified. When the positions of Human Resource Director, Deputy City Manager, Fire Chief, and the City Manager were open, the jobs were not listed on the city website under opportunities. Nor was there any outside search. Instead, internal staff were appointed as interim for the vacant leadership positions and then promoted as permanent without considering other applicants. If we want the best qualified employees, we must not limit the possibilities. By not allowing open application process, the city is discriminating in its most basic form. These two examples are just the tip of the iceberg in uncovering poor budget management and contracts. We can and must do better.
Thank you. We have Clarinda Maripin, followed by Debbie Neiswander and Dennis Smith.
Hi, I'm Clarinda Maripin, and I'm from Ashland. I rise to speak again about the financing of the emergency shelter. On August 19th, the council, as you know, approved $947,000 for the reconstruction of 2200 Ashland Street. On July 7th, City Manager Cotta was quoted in a news article published by JPR that the city has budgeted $800,000 for this renovation project using community development block grants and the state opioid grants. In the agenda packet for August 19th, Scott Fleury wrote that the city currently has approximately $600,000 in opioid settlement funds, of which $500,000 is earmarked for the emergency shelter upgrades. This is simply not true and easily knowable. As of today, we have $402,000, according to Oregon.gov, in opioid settlement funds that we have not spent. The second source cited is the community development block grants. Ashland receives only 134, and according to an email recently received by Brendan Sanderson, the city may only spend 114 of that on capital improvements, and that's assuming we do not spend any more on the nonprofits that normally get that. That leaves the city of Ashland to pay for $431,619.47. A big number, about half. And CM Cotta has identified actually the account that will be coming from. It took me and my fellow researchers months to uncover this information, which is counter to the previous narrative, which folks have told us in the news and other places. Why is this important? For you as counselors, if you believed the packet, you did not have the information for your vote. The public did not have it as well. Getting information like this shouldn't be a battle. We, the public, or at least on my part, want an emergency shelter. We understand that the federal administration's devastation of the social safety net is barreling towards us, and the houseless population can double or triple in the next 12 to 18 months. If we're going to pay for it, it's going to be okay.
Thank you.
But
Thank
what
you.
we need
Thank
is
you.
truth.
Thank you, Ms. Maripan. Debbie Nicewander, Dennis Smith, and Sharon Bryson.
Hello, my name's Debbie Nicewander, and I just kind of want to speak my mind. You know, my heart didn't want to be here tonight, but my head said, stay strong. You know, I'm not anti-police. I'm not against NIMBYs. My goal has always been to build bridges and to stop criminalizing the homeless. And building bridges has been really, really difficult. I had no idea. You know, we talk about being better together, but we don't communicate. We don't collaborate. You know, the city has a need to control the conversation, the outcomes. It's been stressful. And just sitting here listening to the finance report, you know, the houseless do contribute to this community. Every time I buy a cup of coffee at 7-Eleven, you get 11 cents. We're not allowed to cook our own food. We rely on prepared foods. So you run out the homeless, guess what? Your tax revenues are going to go down. Same goes with, and the restaurants are struggling, by the way. Actually, Ashland is struggling. The homeless folks are struggling. We're all struggling. And when are we going to start working together? Also, the dispensaries are thriving. We all smoke cannabis. I smoke cannabis. And that's contributing to the cannabis revenue tax here in Ashland. So don't think of the houseless as being worthless and undeserving, because we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dennis Smith, resident of Ashland, and my wife and I are here tonight because we were informed that there would be a discussion on the building project for a retirement facility that's going on Indiana and Oregon Street, that was going to be happening this evening.
So, sir, if that's the case, so we're looking at the SOU master plan ordinance. So that will be later. We'll call you back up again for that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We also have Sharon Bryson and Brent Thompson. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sharon Bryson, resident of Ashland. And I'm here to kind of follow up with last meeting when I stood right in this spot. And I kind of looked at all of you and I said, please, be skeptical of the information that you get from staff. I had a lot of reasons why I felt that way. And then as the conversation went into the exclusion ordinance, I guess, Mr. Kaplan made it be known that he was working from a different document than the one I had access to. I found that very disturbing. I know you guys probably don't care, but I find it really disturbing. Because how many other things have gone in front of council when the attorney might have had a copy of something different? I don't know, maybe the mayor had a different copy. I don't know. I find that really disturbing. So last week I asked if you would, or last meeting I asked if you would consider 80% skepticism. Can I double that? Please, be careful. If you see an email, make sure everybody's name is on the same email. And the citizens get the same information. I'm not even going to take my 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brent Thompson?
Good evening. I wanted to talk about a couple of things. In the back of the agenda, it has a land acknowledgement, which was also read at the start of the meeting. Do we have a plaque in the plaza also acknowledging that?
We are not able to respond to you while you're in
Sorry.
public forum.
Well, anyway, so that's one of the things I wanted to talk about is continuing the quest for acknowledging the town's history. I've written the council before about having something where the bicycle wreck sculpture is near the gas station where the Siskiyou divides or comes together, depending on how you look at it. That would be nice to have a plaque there acknowledging how we ended up with wonderful Siskiyou Boulevard. And so this was something that the Historic Commission was given, but it hasn't happened yet. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was I'd like the council or the city to revisit the deer issue. There are a couple ladies in my neighborhood who are afraid to walk their dogs without carrying a club or a stick. And I just think we have this ongoing problem, which we've, what's the right word, kicked down the road for 10 years. And I think that the police department would, of course, have statistics about things and, people who felt threatened. But I don't want us to just let this issue go because it's a sensitive issue. And I wrote a column about it 10 years ago, which my son cautioned me not to read here. And so I will drop it off and you can look at it at your leisure. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now to our first public hearing. Public hearing, first reading of ordinance 3278. 6, vacating a portion of the Fern Street public right-of-way. Sabrina?
So Director Fleury will walk us through this tonight. So essentially, working with SOU to kind of vacate the right-of-way to allow them to move forward with some of their plans. He can go over the details with that, but we are looking for council to approve this first reading tonight.
So good evening. Before the council is a request to consider the vacation of a public right-of-way. The public right-of-way is unimproved and it is known as Fern Street, which this section that we're talking about tonight is to the east of the connection with Roca Street. Now, as part of a vacation process, there's a bunch of regulatory requirements that you have to follow in order to initiate, start the process, and then formally approve a vacation itself. Those are outlined in Ashland Municipal Code 4.18, but they're also outlined in Oregon Revised Statute 271. So there is a very formal, structured process that you have to follow to consider vacating something that is in the public interest. Now, previously of March of this year, I brought forward a request to begin the initiation process of vacating this public right-of-way. Per the ORS, the City Council has the ability to initiate this process, and that was the request. At that time, the council did approve the request to begin the initiation process. That moves us on to other portions of the code, both local code and state code, that we have to follow. Our code is a little bit more restrictive than the state code, 4.18. Our code requires the Planning Commission hold a public hearing on the matter and go through a public noticing process and formulate a recommendation that comes to council within kind of 60 days of their meeting time. So the Planning Commission held a meeting on July 22nd and August 26th to consider the vacation and make a recommendation to the City Council. The next process is a public noticing and a public hearing for the City Council to consider the ordinance that would vacate that public right-of-way. And there's noticing requirements required of that process, both on the physical site and through a newspaper, which the city recorders help facilitate that process. And those are both outlined in the ORS and the AMC as well. So as part of the Planning Commission discussion, typically they look at the overall need from a transportation basis and potentially look at the additional access required or to support some sort of pedestrian connectivity. And this has transpired on the few that I processed in my tenure here with the city. The Planning Commission's looking at holding some level of connectivity in the system. So there was some discussions with SOU and the Planning Commission as part of those public hearings. And the recommendation that came out of that was to provide for a public pedestrian easement through a lower section of SOU-owned tax lots that would provide future pedestrian connectivity from Roca to Madrone Street. They also discussed a public utility easement to protect storm drain infrastructure as part of that system as well. So this is the motion that was compiled by the Planning Commission. They recommended supporting staff's recommendation to vacate that public right-of-way and also develop a pedestrian access easement through those other SOU-owned tax lots. Now, I know you've seen and we've had some discussion about storm drain infrastructure in that area. There is an existing storm drain line within that public right-of-way right now. As you can see, the arrow, it doesn't extend all the way to Roca Creek. It only goes down, 20 or 30 feet onto the property there. We've been asked by some of the local residents to look at that storm drain infrastructure because that intersection has some flooding, icing related issues. And so internally, staff is looking at that for some potential changes to the storm drain infrastructure system to facilitate that. One of the things that we are also looking at is potentially abandoning that line and connecting it further downstream on Roca, and it would still outfall to Roca Creek itself. As long as that line remains in place within that public right-of-way, and if we vacate it, we will need a public utility easement over that area to give us access to clean and maintain that line. If we do end up abandoning that line and doing some infrastructure changes on the maintenance-related side, then we would eliminate or extinguish that easement. And these are things that we would process with SOU, their surveyor, after the fact, if the council does consider moving forward with this vacation process. So the motion is to take no action or to make a motion to approve the reading of the ordinance. And within the ordinance structure, what you're actually approving is the legal description of that boundary to be vacated. So that's the language structure in the ordinance itself. If the council so chooses to move forward, since this is an ordinance reading, we would do a second reading at the next business meeting, and then that document would be formalized and recorded at Jackson County and become official. Once that becomes official, then SOU would formalize deed descriptions of the new boundary of the property and however they would like to absorb that into their adjacent tax lots. We would also execute any sort of easement-related legal descriptions and boundaries and a map of survey that shows that. And those documents would be formally recorded at Jackson County Surveyor as well. So they would become legally binding as part of that overall process. On vacations, we don't typically have anybody do any of this additional legwork beforehand and expend dollars towards that because it's at the discretion of the council to approve a vacation. And so until such time as the council does or does not, then we take action after the fact. And really, that's kind of the general overview of this vacation request of the council, and I'll try to answer any questions.
Questions? Councillor Sherrill.
Thank you, Scott, for explaining that. Just a little more detail as it pertains to the storm drain that could potentially be moved. If we're looking at the greatest and best use for that land and there's a storm drain that may or may not be used, is there just talk of moving it or is there a plan to move it? Are we within regulation to be able to move that further down Roca to open up that piece of land for more possibilities?
Yeah, that's one of our options. You know, we haven't formalized any sort of consideration yet, but we would look at connecting downstream and adding additional catch basin infrastructure. One of the things that would benefit operationally is we would have one less dedicated outfall that we would have to inspect annually on the maintenance side of things per our MS4, our municipal storm sewer conveyance permit that's regulated by DEQ. So if we remove one of those things, that's one less inspection that we have to perform and take up staff time to do that. And then just downstream, there's 2 additional outfalls that take that stormwater that come down Roca, El Cater, and Fern out to Roca Creek. So in speaking with our collections system staff and one of our project managers, I think the intent is to really focus on abandoning that line and increasing some storm drain capacity within that section of Roca to outfall at a lower section.
Copy, thanks.
Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Scott. Ultimately, what's our goal here? I mean, could you break it down for us?
So Public Works recommendation is to vacate that property. You know, from a transportation network structure, you would not be able to have a true and fruitful connection from Fern to Madrone because of the grade and Roca Creek. And so we would, as planning made the recommendation to have some sort of pedestrian connectivity that would connect Roca to Madrone at some point through future development and actions. And the highest and best use of that would be some sort of development on that property and then put that tax lot on the tax rolls. And if you were to develop on that, you know, from a roadway infrastructure, you would be looking at least how I see things, you know, a driveway access to kind of a lot split and not so much a road infrastructure connection because of the environmental and topographic constraints.
So we're really looking at, like, you know, putting some infrastructure to develop this property to hand it off to somebody else because SOU is looking to divest of this. And I'm curious what that price tag would be, not so much the number, but who's going to pay for the work to be done, to have the survey, to have all of this prepped and put on a platter with a bow on it?
So that would be the obligation to SOU to take care of all the deed restructuring and develop the easements and the overlays for that and have those documents recorded. So that wouldn't be a city obligation, that would be an SOU obligation. The city obligation would be to make changes to the storm drain infrastructure system. And if we already have had, you know, this is a little bit newer to me. From a notification to the residents, they recently I've had a couple discussions with them about that issue. And we've inspected the site and we can see why that issue could develop there because of what's installed there is not what you would install under today's infrastructure regime. And so I can see some issues that would creep up out of that. So that would be kind of handled in our storm drain maintenance funds to do those changes in that system.
Okay, one more if I may. I'm curious, after SOU does the work and it's on a platter with a bow, could it go into alternative holding? Like, could it be held by a neighborhood association with a conservation easement? I just wonder if, the owner doesn't have to be the city or another private entity. And that might be a planning question, but could you help me with that?
It's a combination of, that would be kind of a public-private partnership potentially, or a partnership with, say, the Land Conservancy, to have some sort of deed restriction on a certain percentage of that would be considered undevelopable, where the rest would be open for development. Those decisions and discussions could happen as part of a planning application and process, because there are open space requirements for, certain developments, and they would look at potentially having a certain percentage of that area covered in open space to meet those requirements. So people would have the ability to comment and on that through the planning application development process.
But our job and our task right now is to vote on this vacation. I mean, raise your hand if you want a vacation. Right, let's give Scott a vacation. But that's our job tonight, is to vote on this, and then whether or not SOU moves forward with that, that work is after this part.
Yeah, the primary focus is the vacation of this unimproved right-of-way.
We're not committing to taking the land on by approving this vacation.
No, it would become the obligation and ownership of SOU, and then they would have to work through their processes.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Kaplan.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. This one's a little new for me too, in the sense that I understand the process as you've described it, and what you want us to do today, which is to approve a vacation.
The city manager has denied it already.
Yeah. But all of which makes sense. But I'm also interested in the condition. There are a number of other factors that it seems like everybody's interested in. The Planning Commission listed them in their own recommendation about pedestrian access, about all the storm drain. You've talked about some of those things, and you've described the process as something that we approve this now, and then over the course of some time, SOU is interested in. They said they're interested in doing it. Maybe it's a priority for them. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I guess I'm curious why we wouldn't attach conditions to this so that the vacation would be subject to some of these other public benefits that we want to protect, and that SOU is interested in doing as well.
I think that's the policy-related discussion for the city council. It's not a staff-related item. It's more of a policy-related discussion for any sort of restrictions that the council would like to see placed on that if it is vacated. We've never, from my standpoint, never put some sort of restriction on, say, a surplus property that you've sold. You could put a deed restriction on that and make it announced to the buyer that this is the restriction. But from a vacation standpoint, typically the area is vacated and the adjoining parcels take 50% ownership of it. And that's the end of the story, unless there's easements or things that need to be obtained that are just instilled in that back-end process.
And that's what we've seen in the half a dozen vacations that we've seen since I've been on the council. So this is just a different animal, and I'm struggling with it a little bit because I'm feeling like I'd like to put those conditions on it, and I'm not wanting to hold up the legal process of moving forward. But I'm wanting to make sure that we're protecting those accesses. I'm wondering how long those kinds of things take. Is there a time constraint on this that would make that, inadvisable?
From my standpoint, it's not a time constraint. It's how fast SOU would want to process, the documentation to be recorded legally, and how they intend to move forward with any sort of surplus of that right-of-way if it is vacated.
But they could comply with the conditions that are listed by the Planning Commission seem like they could be, it's not involving civil works, it's involving legal accesses. So that seems like that could be complied with relatively quickly. Is that right?
Yeah, so the council would essentially affirm the Planning Commission's recommendation, and then those restrictions would be in place. You don't add those to the ordinance because the ordinance itself is just a legal description of what you're vacating. And that's kind of where I get to, there's the horse and the cart. So if the council supports the Planning Commission's recommendation, you would say as such, and I would even say a secondary motion, I know how legal would look at that, but approve the ordinance and then affirm the need to establish a public pedestrian access easement as recommended by the Planning Commission.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, thank you. Just so I could kind of maybe hopefully simplify this for folks at home that are kind of getting into this, and this is the way I understand it. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but essentially we've got a piece of property, we would like to vacate it. The neighborhood says, well, hey, we really like to use this as pedestrian access, so we're not really happy with that. SOU comes forward and says, hey, in good faith, we're happy to meet with you, we'd like to put a pedestrian easement in. And the city's part of that is saying, hey, in good faith, we're gonna put storm drain access in so that this property can be developed and prevent any kind of flooding issues. Did I package that up
Overall,
in
yeah.
in a neat way?
Yeah.
Seems to make sense to me. Thank you.
Other questions of staff? Okay, we will move to the public hearing. I open the public hearing. We have several people who have signed up to speak to us. Mr. Smith, is this the element that you wanted to speak to, or is it the master plan? Okay, great. So the people who have signed up to speak on this issue tonight will have 3 minutes at the podium, same information that I posted or I spoke about before. At the 20-second mark, when you have 20 seconds left, you'll hear the first chime. Your signal will turn to yellow on the light reader, and then when you're out of time, it will go to red. That will happen at the 3-minute mark. The 3 people who have signed up to speak with us this evening as part of the public hearing are Bruce Bergstrom, Janine Grizzard, and Allison Laughlin. Please tell us your name and the city in which you reside at the start of your testimony.
Hey, my name is Bruce Bergstrom, and I'm here to talk on the Fern Street vacancy. There's a couple things. We all went to the planning committee meeting to speak, and it was a private meeting, so we were not allowed to speak. And so they went ahead and they did whatever they did. You have the results of their meeting. None of us spoke. Out of the meeting, they changed the right-of-way from going from Roca Street to Roca Creek. They ran it parallel to Roca Street, which is about a 10, 20 foot, whatever the width of the street is, right-of-way. And it's also a pedestrian right-of-way. And there's a storm drain in that right-of-way right now, and it's about a 10-foot diameter, or 10-inch diameter storm drain. And it was crushed right north of the Hall's property, which I don't know how to explain it, but it's quite a ways down from Fern Street. It was crushed because Dr. Hall's son used to run his landscaping business out of that vacant lot that they owned. And he ran equipment over it, and he crushed the pipe. Well, I was coming home, and I noticed that there was a city truck parked on the Fern Street right-of-way, and it was digging a big hole. And they dug a big hole, and they ended up exposing a pipe that was at least 14 inches in diameter, a big pipe, a big storm drain. And it was only about 20 feet down from Fern Street, or from Roca Street, down the Fern Street right-of-way. And the pipe just dead-ended there, and they stopped there, and the city guy was sitting there looking at his map, and he says, well, this is supposed to go clear down to the creek. And I said, well, that's what we've been told. It shows on the city map that there's a right-of-way all the way down to the creek, and that's where the storm drain should have gone. Well, it didn't. It stopped there, and they just had the storm drain go into the decomposed granite, and I guess they expected the right-of-way to go away. The other point I wanted to make was right now they have the pedestrian easement going down a driveway, and if we're supposed to understand that we're supposed to walk down a driveway, it's not going to happen.
Thank you.
My name is Janine Grizzard. I live at 698 Roca Street for the last 19 and a half years. My land bisects the canyon and goes very far up, very close to Leonard. I would like to state that the city's designation of Roca Creek as seasonal is incorrect. Roca Creek does not dry out. This is an important point for the wildlife, of which there is a great abundance in this canyon. I would like to second all of Allison Laughlin's points that you will hear in a minute. I have a rhetorical question. It's a practical question. The SOU attorney, Rob Partridge, has some degree, unknown to me, of expertise in real estate development. Is there a developer or more than one lined up to buy Roca Park, and do they have a development design plan, and can we see it? The reason for asking this is because there is a solution to developing Roca Park for houses, keeping the Fern Street easement with an access trail for pedestrians, relocating the 3 disc golf park holes, it's actually more like 2, so that important asset to the young people of the city does not go away, primarily young people. You want to attract young people living here, so that closure does not occur, and not trying and failing to keep all the wildlife away from this creek after a housing development. There is a solution to this. This is a design solution. And that design solution that I would like to recommend is to not vacate the Fern Street easement, put the path to the creek down there. There is a path along the riparian area in front of the creek to go all the way down into the SOU parking lot and up to Madrone Street, an existing trail. And to sell off lot 648, the one right above, right south of the Fern Street easement, separately as a single-family home to be developed. They still get to sell their property, but they carve that one out with the huge area of land up on the Leonard Street side that can't be cut. You know, it's very hard to do. That goes to a homeowner, and they have that for a single-family home. And you would have had a drawing for me if my husband's memorial hadn't been a couple of days ago. There's a solution here. And the whole neighborhood is opposed to this. You have dozens of people opposed to this vacation.
Thank you. Allison Laughlin.
Hi, here I am again. Good to see you. My name's Alison Laughlin. I've lived at 717 Roca Street for 40 years. Each time I come to these meetings, new stuff comes up and I'm not very... Anyway, I also want to attach a condition to the easement vacation. It makes me nervous that I'm not quite sure how things are going to come out. As Scott showed you, the university, Rob Patridge in his letter, has offered an access road down the northernmost section of the property. But as Bruce said, that's going to be on a sealed trail. It's going to be going into, I don't know, 3 to 6 houses. And at the bottom, it's way too steep for pedestrians. So this is really unacceptable. We need a designated trail, not a sealed driveway access road. I'm requesting that the city use part of, or all of, part of the Fern Street easement, now a 20-foot wide strip from Roker Street down to the creek for pedestrian access easement, and then have this easement continue north along the creek to the SOU parking lot. This creekside easement has already been offered by SOU in Rob Partridge's August 26 letter, where he proposed to deed a section of property along both sides of Roker Creek to provide public access to this riparian corridor in perpetuity, unquote. This section from Fern Street right-of-way to the SOU parking lot is the section that must be an easement. So it will go down the Fern Street right-of-way and left along the creek on this section that will be public access. I'm not sure how access to the eastern slope up to Madrone Street is going to be established, but a bridge over Roker Creek would connect with any trail that is there. That proposed trail route would manage three things: a trail from Roker Street to the SOU parking lot, a trail that has been well used and very popular for 50 years or more, allow continued access to Roker Creek for SOU staff and students, local children and the public, an important place of solitude, study, nature, lunch breaks and conversations. That's been an important part, as well as the trail. Connect any east side trail to Roker Street, enabling the desired Roker Street to Madrone public access trail that we're all trying to achieve. I'm also concerned about the stormwater easements, because I thought in conversations with Scott that we had that taken care of. We really need the stormwater easement at Fern Street. There's just so much water that comes down, so I'm concerned that that's going to change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alyssa, are there any other signups? Okay. I close the public hearing. Are there any further questions of staff? Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. So Scott, I'm more confused than when I read the packet. If we approve the vacation, we're covering our bases for work that may or may not be done. The work doesn't have to be done, but the vacation would be established for the opportunity to be done.
Correct.
Correct. But working off the Planning Commission's recommendations, I'm just curious at this point if we can after, or contingent with the vote, we have some sort of teeth in this where we have the neighborhood working with SOU or some, it seems as though I would feel comfortable moving this forward if there was more flexibility. And I don't know if you can answer that or not, but is there anything we could do tonight that you see that might not limit what SOU in the neighborhood might want to do based on, I don't know what SOU wants to sell this to. I don't know what the neighbors might be willing to negotiate with, but it seems as though I don't want my action to tie any hands tonight. So could you advise on that?
I'm not sure how to thread that needle from my standpoint. That's a hard
we
one.
have Mr. Patridge behind you if we want to pull him into the discussion. I don't know if that's kosher or not for this, but.
Let me ask Johan.
I mean, I can't speak for Mr. Patridge and what he's willing to do, but I mean, I think it was what Director Fleury was trying to explain earlier is the vacation of the property and the adoption of the recommendation from the Planning Committee are kind of the same, but also kind of different. And so the Planning Committee Planning Commission seems to have made their recommendations, and the council adopting those, I think, would limit it to the extent that it may require a pedestrian easement and a utility easement, depending on what happens with the storm drain. I guess I'm not entirely sure what you mean in tying people's hands. Those are almost certainly going to be a part of this issue. But as far as other limitations, I'm not entirely sure if I'm tracking what. As far as restricting SOU, this ordinance will not do that.
Looks like Rob's.
Yeah, I mean, the council would have to make additional recommendations. So if you wanted to relocate that pedestrian easement, you know, and make that contingent on finalizing the vacation, or adding additional pedestrian connections, you would have to make that contingent on the vacation as part of the process. Like I said, the other issue with this is, you know, that unknown. So from a development standpoint, you would have the ability to comment on a development application at the Planning Commission of how that property got partitioned, how the open space was used and things of that, depending on the severity or difficulty of the application process and what.
Both Planning Commission and Council get another bite at the apple.
The Planning Commission would as a development process. The council, after the second reading of the ordinance, would be out of the discussion.
Just point of clarification there, the council would get another bite at it if there was an appeal to the Planning Commission's decision.
Right, okay.
So if the easement wasn't in place and the neighborhood said, we want to do this, there would be it would come before council at that time.
But that would only be in terms of the procedure, not the content.
Correct, and then it would be a LUBA thing. But as far as the open space, things that he's discussing, and yeah.
Okay. Did you have a question of the SOU representatives?
I would love to get Mr. Patridge's opinion to weigh in here.
Are you willing to do that? If you would take the microphone there, that would be great.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, I was asking for an impossible answer there.
Go ahead.
For the record, my name is Rob Patridge. I'm the General Counsel for Southern Oregon University. Thank you for taking this up under consideration. I know it's a difficult process to go through related to what goes on. I think we've tried to engage the neighborhood community related to what's happened related to this particular property and continued access. We do believe that the access easement is a better easement overall, so that it doesn't adversely affect the overall highest and best use for the property. We have also offered, should the city want to take it, or a some not-for-profit, as indicated in our letter, to deed the back part of the property along Roca Creek. You know, the university doesn't have a particular use for that, but we know that that area is very steep and very dangerous, and it wouldn't be something that we would want to put on property owners to have an access easement for private property owners along that creek. They just don't have the ability to get the insurance and the other things that would be at risk. It really needs to be a large not-for-profit or a city or a state group is our assessment of what it is, and talking to developers and other people. We don't have a plan related to, or a drawing related to what might come before the Planning Commission at this point in time. Really, it's, you know, our plan is really to help put this back. We're going to put this back into the tax rolls. It will be developed because it's excess property for SOU too. So hopefully there will be additional revenue for the city on the long term related to this. We're very happy to work with the city related to whatever stormwater easement needs to go there. You know, we want what's best for the community, but that's for the experts to decide. We're ready to move very quickly and rapidly to get those things done, which also kind of limits the Roca Creek property on the back. But again, I think any developer would be willing to, you know, to take a look at that for an access. Ultimately, to have it deeded as we indicated in our letter, but SOU doesn't have the ability to continue to retain that. The city, if it wanted it, could take it from a parks or other perspective, but I know you have a lot of restrictions related to what it costs and your maintenance of all of these kinds of areas. So we're all looking at it from a policy and fiscal standpoint, but getting it back on the tax rolls and getting it a highest and best use is what we'd like to see happen.
Great.
Well, I appreciate you coming up and speaking to the council and helping clarify a little bit. I don't know if I have any more clarity, but I appreciate the efforts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So If there are no further questions, the floor is open. Is there a further question? No. The floor is open for a motion. Councillor Kaplan.
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 3276, an ordinance relating to the vacation of a portion of Fern Street, affirming the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission regarding this matter.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Okay. For lack of a second, the motion dies. The floor is open for a motion. Councillor Bloom.
Yes, I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 3276, an ordinance relating to the vacation of a portion of Fern Street, and to place the ordinance on the council agenda for second reading on October 21st, 2025.
Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Councillor Bloom.
Yeah, I mean, I think this makes sense. It's an opportunity to develop more housing. I think that, you know, as I kind of did in my little pocket summary, I think that this proposal meets everybody in the middle. There's concessions made by the city, concessions made by SOU, and I think that that is done in good faith. There was a discussion earlier about why is development down in Ashland? Well, it's because we are a difficult city to develop in. And we have conversations about, you know, wanting to make sure that there's as much flexibility as possible. Well, if we were to go forward with conditional use restrictions that the Planning Commission is trying to put forward, that is not flexibility, that's a restriction that affects the ability to develop this property, to generate more tax revenue for the community and more housing for this community. I firmly believe that we do need housing for all, but that's all types. It is not for us to decide who that is. And I think that SOU is doing this community a favor by opening up these tax lots for development, and I fully support this going forward without any restrictions.
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Mayor. In addition to what Councilor Bloom said, I think I would just summarize it by saying that I don't necessarily believe that this process should be done through Public Works, but rather through community development when this process comes back as a potentially developable property. We have land use ordinances in place. The Planning Commission would take this up at that time and would go through the appropriate process then. I think it's too premature to put restrictions on this as part of, again, Public Works. This is a planning decision, a community development decision, a housing decision that should flow through the tools and the processes that we already have in place. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's input and work on this, and I appreciate the Planning Commission's recommendations and hard work. But I mean, we heard from the community. They have ideas and great suggestions. We heard from SOU. They would like to divest of this, and we're going to hear more about their master plan. But I get it, and also, like, I echo my colleagues' comments, which is, you know, I don't think the restrictions at this point are going to be beneficial to the process and building bridges between what the neighborhood wants, what the community might need. So I say, well, you know, let's move forward with this and let the private parties work it out, because I also don't think the city wants to take on the burden of this property either. That's just my opinion. Not speaking for anybody else here. So I support this, and I look forward to seeing what comes out. And I hope that the trail gets preserved and the neighborhood can work with the developer and the Frisbee golfs. I mean, I want it all for everybody. Let's see what happens.
Councillor Sherrill.
Yeah, thanks for ironing out these last few final questions. I just wanted to speak briefly to the neighborhood involvement and the people that have put a lot of time and effort into this. And we've, you know, I've spent 20 years of my life studying change in housing, and the different things that bring up the thoughts that we have when there's development near us. And I just want to say that I have compassion for that, and I have an understanding for that. And I also understand the deep need for housing, and I'm really proud of our state that's been passing laws in every session to make housing easier, to make more housing types available by right. There's a reason why housing is so expensive, and it's because it's so hard to produce. I don't think that this collaboration is over. I think that there's going to be room for the community members in that area and the developer to come together and try to find a win-win for everybody. And it's not an easy decision to support development, especially when it's can potentially, through some lens, look like the city is just giving away property to a for-profit developer in the long run. So I understand concerns, but I plan to support this, and I wanted to just be on the record explaining why.
Councillor Duquesne.
Thank you, Mayor. I ditto what my colleagues have brought up. I too look at the housing need. I look at the tax expansion that we need. We just looked at our finances. I mentioned property tax, and we need that base. And I too feel that SOU, you have this property, it's sitting there, we can use it. We don't know what it looks like when it's all said and done with, so we don't have to go to the what ifs because we're not there yet. So I appreciate moving this forward. I support it, and yes.
Roll call, please, Alyssa.
Sherrill,
Yes.
Dale,
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Kaplan,
Yes.
Duquesne,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay, we move on to the next public hearing. And we need to move through it relatively quickly, or we'll have to postpone it. We have to be done by 8. So the public hearing for a legislative amendment to the Southern Oregon University Facilities Master Plan and first reading of ordinances 3267, 3268, and 3269, number PA-L-2025-00016.
So Brandon and Derek will correct me if I stray too far here, but you have heard most of this before. Tonight, our focus is really on what's in your packet regarding the conditional use permit applicability to this process. So this was pulled off the agenda and postponed due to the kind of varying understanding of council direction from the last meeting. So they'll walk us through this, but that's kind of the focus for tonight.
Thank you, Manager Cotter. Mayor and Council, Brandon Goldman, Community Development Director. To my left is Derek Severson, our Planning Manager. As was mentioned, the council reviewed this at a prior public hearing on July 15th, and at that point passed first reading of the ordinance. When it came back to you with the amendments council directed on August 19th, there was request for a reconsideration in order to provide clarity regarding the conditional use permit. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on the master plan and had recommended approval with a number of conditions that were presented to you at that prior first reading. So essentially the proposal is a legislative amendment to adopt the Southern Oregon University 2025 Facilities Master Plan. It is compiled of both zoning map adjustments relating to surplus SOU property that would be moved into private ownership. It includes comprehensive plan amendment to correspond with those new zoning designations as well. But most notably, and for discussion tonight, is the land use code amendments, which council had amended on July 15th. I did want to note that the changes that you made at that meeting were fully incorporated into this draft ordinance. And so because we're back at first reading, they need not be read into the record as a whole. But the amendments that you directed included establishing maximum height allowances within the the SO zone, with the exception of the area of Ashland Street and Walker. It allowed up to 60-foot permitted height outright and up to 70 feet with a conditional use permit. So this is for the lion's share of the campus, but with that small area at the corner of Ashland Street and Walker, which is defined in their plan as the quote-unquote university district adjacent to our climate-friendly areas, the recommendation was to allow 50 feet permitted outright or up to 60 feet if the building included affordable housing or student housing. And if it was higher than 50 feet or 60 feet respectively, it would require a conditional use permit with a maximum height on that intersection of 110 feet. I would note that any development of this is subject to site review. The question that came up at the prior hearing had to do with the conditional use permits regarding height, and I'll get into in a moment the question about conditional use permits in relation to proximity from privately owned properties. The other change that was directed by council, which is incorporated into the ordinance, was modifying the section relating to solar panels, that freestanding solar panels could have a height limit of up to 38 feet. And we also clarified in the ordinance that although the plan illustrated carport-style solar panels, that in order to provide opportunities for alternative installations such as dual-access tracking systems, clarified that those indications in SOU's facilities master plan are illustrative and not prescriptive, so that a future solar panel installation wouldn't be held to that design. And now we get to the issue of the requested reevaluation. So what might have been unclear before council is that there's a number of things that trigger conditional use permits within the SO zone. One being if there is any use, site design, or construction activity within 50 feet of a privately owned property. So that wasn't discussed by the council. It was discussed by the Planning Commission, and I'll touch on their recommendation in a bit. But essentially, SOU, in looking at that, recognized that that would limit design flexibility and add a review process before the Planning Commission. And to be forthright, it's a discretionary review process because the commission would be looking at opportunities to address adverse impacts to the neighborhood through the establishment of conditions. So as such, SOU wanted to see if council would consider modifications to that. They further, in looking at the code, because it requires a conditional use permit for any construction or use within 50 feet of privately owned property, could be interpreted that if they were redoing a sidewalk adjacent to a neighborhood, that would trigger a conditional use permit. I would note that in past practice, and Derek is going to go through some of the conditional use permit activity, both the triggers and past projects on SOU, but typically the development of a new development triggering site review that is adjacent to a street that is neighborhood private property facing are those that would trigger a conditional use permit. Typical landscape maintenance, sidewalk maintenance, those have not come up as a conditional use because they don't trigger a planning action. But with that, we did reach out to our GIS department in order to provide some clarity in terms of which properties are within 50 feet of which SOU properties are within 50 feet of privately owned properties. And the map provided in your packet and presented on screen really shows a delineation that relates to street width. So larger order streets like Siskiyou Boulevard and Ashland Street that bisect SOU's campus are much wider than 50 feet. So a privately owned property across the street is not within 50 feet of SOU property nor development, and as such wouldn't be regulated. However, on the southern area of campus, you have a lot of neighborhood streets, and those are lower order streets, and you also have properties that are immediately adjacent to existing residential property. In those areas, the lower order neighborhood streets are only 47 feet wide, so the 50-foot buffer does extend onto SOU property by a few feet. So that was one point of clarification that SOU would like. Typically, from the planning department's perspective, we would look at a development that even has 3 feet into that property. If the development is upon that frontage, they would be making modifications to the sidewalk as part of that development, access as part of that development, and those would trigger a conditional use permit. And with that, I wanted to note, and Derek's going to go through these slides, what some of the conditional use permit requirements are.
Yeah, so for a conditional use permit or COP, as you'll see here in the slides, there's a requirement for conditional use permit when a use is not listed in the master plan. So if they come up with something that's different than illustrated, it would require a conditional use permit, as well as what we're discussing here, development within 50 feet of private property. buildings over the allowed height, or wireless communication facilities on SOU property. Typically, conditional use permits give the Planning Commission or Council the ability to impose conditions that are found necessary to ensure the use is compatible with other uses in the vicinity and that the negative impact of the proposed use on surrounding uses is minimized or mitigated. Generally, those conditions can address things like limits on specific details of operations, design and compatibility of the building to fit the surrounding neighborhood context, site or environmental mitigations, access and circulation or infrastructure requirements, things like regulating the placement of a driveway relative to surrounding residential neighborhoods. So you wouldn't, for instance, on the campus have, the driveway from a parking lot serving the stadium level of circulation opposite a single-family residential driveway or something like that. And then landscaping and resource protection, which can get to fencing, screening, preservation of natural resources, that sort of thing. Since the master plan was adopted in 2010, we've had a number of projects that did require conditional use permits. None of them actually had to do with proximity to private property. They were sort of all on that north end of campus on higher order streets, so they didn't trigger the proximity to private lots. But the Theater Arts Building, Raider Village with the residence halls and the dining hall, the Farm and Sustainability Center on Walker at East Main, the Student Recreation Center, and the Lithium Motors Pavilion that replaced McNeil Pavilion, and wireless facilities on the stadium lights, all triggered conditional uses. Probably, you can go to the next one. Probably the clearest illustration of the benefit as well as the impact of conditional use permit to SOU and the benefit to the neighborhood is the dining hall. That dining hall went through a conditional use permit because it was, along with the residence halls, conditional use permit included because they were over the allowed height, which under the 2010 plan is 40 feet. They were over the length of 250 feet per building. And then they were also in a location other than what was shown in the master plan. And that was really the key consideration for the dining hall, which is a 27,500 square foot building directly across from residential development along Whiteman Street. And because of that conditional use permit requirement, the university came forth with a proposal that limited that 27,000 square foot building where all the other buildings in that application were 4 stories. The dining hall, as it relates to Whiteman, is single story. It was built with a 15-foot residential setback to relate to the character of that neighborhood. Outdoor public space, as you see here on the kind of south side of that building, was placed away from the residential area, so any kind of outdoor gathering wouldn't impact it. There was acoustic dampering to the building, and all the lighting was dark sky compatible. So the conditional use permit requirement, without the city imposing anything, put the applicants in a position to modify the proposal to demonstrate that it was compatible with that neighborhood.
So we're coming to the 8 o'clock timeline, which is when we want to make sure that by our rules, we need to have public testimony complete. So in conferring with our attorney, he said we can deal with the public hearing at this point and then come back to the staff presentation.
We could conclude the presentation in 1 minute.
Councilor?
Yeah, thank you. In an abundance of caution, I own a solar company that works for SOU. I'll be recusing myself from the discussion and the vote.
Okay, thank you. Alyssa, are there any additional signups?
Director
Johan.
Goldman did say he could finish in 1 minute, so that would give us enough time.
Okay, go ahead.
So essentially, I just wanted to clarify that the Planning Commission at their June 25th meeting did discuss at some length the question about the 50-foot proximity to privately owned property and felt that the conditional use permit provides an appropriate level of oversight and public review. Additionally, staff had supported that when going before the Planning Commission and supports retaining the existing 50-foot CUP standard for new development adjacent to private property. It does also allow the hearing authority to consider other potential impacts beyond those specifically identified by Derek as individual projects that we can't conceive of what the impacts would be. And so lastly, closing presentations, we'd like to leave a potential motion for council's consideration.
Great, thank you. And we will have you back up for questions, or you can actually stay there because our folks will speak at the podium. So Alyssa, you've clarified that we have just this one. Okay, so I am calling forward, I'm opening the public hearing. Dennis Smith, is he still here? Dennis Smith, okay. I close the public hearing, and we will now take questions for staff. Are there any questions of staff? Okay, the floor is open for a motion.
Happy to make a motion, Mayor.
Councilor Bloom.
I move to approve first reading, excuse me, of ordinances 3267, 3268, and 3269, adopting Southern Oregon University's 2025 Facilities Master Plan Amendment, including the red line revisions submitted by Southern Oregon University in their letter dated September 26, 2025, as part of the official record and incorporated by reference.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Councilor Bloom?
Yeah, thank you. When this came before us in July, I made the original motion to adopt these ordinances. I was very clear in my intent that we not restrict SOU's ability to manage its own campus. The council supported that motion unanimously. Tonight's action simply reaffirms that shared intent and incorporates SOU's redlined revisions, which clarify the language without changing the substance of what we already agreed to. This adoption honors the partnership between the city and the university, provides clarity and certainty for SU's future projects, and continues our collaborative approach to planning that benefits the entire Ashland community.
Councilor Dale?
No, thank you.
So are there other deliberations? Roll call, please, Alyssa.
Bloom,
Yes.
Dale,
Yes.
Sherrill,
Yes.
Hanson.
He's
Oh,
recused
sorry,
himself.
my apologies. Duquesne,
Yes.
Kaplan.
Yes.
Motion pass.
Thank you. We will take a short recess. We have 7:59 by that clock. Please be back in your seats at 8:10. I call the meeting back to order. Careful of the praying mantis on the post, please. Let's be gentle around the post until we get done. Okay. We are back to order. We are back to order. We are now to ordinances, resolutions, and contracts. We have second reading of ordinance number 3273, an ordinance amending AMC Section 10.120, enhanced law enforcement area and persistent violation. Sabrina?
All right, tonight we're back for a second reading of the ELIA. So we are looking for a motion tonight. The amendments, presented by council last meeting have been incorporated. Ty does have one minor adjustment up here, fixing the ORS within the, ordinance. And with that, we are looking for a motion to move forward.
Ty O'Meara, Mayor and Councilors, I don't have anything. Just as Sabrina said, I'd request that that minor adjustment be made, incorporated into the second reading or beforehand, whatever is appropriate.
Okay. Are there questions of staff? Councilor Kaplan.
Yeah, thanks Ty and Johan for working on this. In looking through this last version, which as you said reflects all the amendments that we asked for last reading, I'm noticing a change that I hadn't really focused on before, which is in the current ordinance, item 10.120.040 automatically includes certain variances to preserve access to necessary services. It's an automatic. It says, the language says, any judgment that includes an expulsion shall also include the following exceptions to the terms of the expulsion from the applicable ELIA. And then so that means the expelled individual doesn't have to list all of the variances that they may need. We talked about that last time, that there's a lot of reasons that the judge could grant the variance, but they would have to, the initiative has to come by the person being expelled and ask for specific variances. The new one, says, allows certain exclusions, but it says a court of competent jurisdiction may at its discretion grant a variance to an expelled person at any time during the period of expulsion if the person demonstrates by clear and convincing evidence, and there's 4 items, that's 10.120.050F. It's a whole new set of conditions that the person has to demonstrate in order to qualify for a variance. So I'm wondering, why make it more complicated for the person to actually enumerate these variances and demonstrate the need for those variances rather than rely on the just a blanket open variance as was the case currently. And I understand also is the case in Medford.
Thanks, Councilor. My understanding, and I'm going to lean on Johan, is that the blanket carve-outs are there automatically to obtain social services, groceries, employment, whatnot, unless I'm missing something, and that additional carve-outs can be requested if there's a justification for them. That's my understanding.
So additional carve-outs, not those, so maybe just a clarification there, saying for additional variances, if demonstrated.
Right. Everybody gets the
basic ones.
Right, and then if there's anything that, because we're not going to think of anything, if you can make that case to the judge, then the judge has the authority to put in additional carve-outs.
And I think, Counselor, if you wanted to amend, I think that was the intent of council, and I know when we were drafting it, that was the intent. So if you wanted to put an amendment, if council does decide to move forward and say a court of competent jurisdiction may add additional variances, and just add that qualifier, essentially.
Okay, one more detail on the same section, F. The way it's written, A, B, C, D, it looks like you have to satisfy all 4. There's no or there. And I think actually the intention probably was that it's only one of those 4, because I'm not sure that it's possible to comply with all 4 of these. So is that right? So that's another maybe possible amendment. Do you understand? You got the...
I do. I don't know the legalese writing techniques if the
Yeah,
or is
after
implied or
that
what.
semicolon, there should be an or.
For C, there should be an
Correct.
or, right?
Yeah, sorry, for C.
It's a, yeah, because you got, otherwise it reads that the person has to comply with all 4.
Well, there's no and or are or.
There's
So,
no,
yeah.
there's no or, so there's
We're
an
going to do our
and.
best to write this as clear as possible,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Thanks, I have no further questions.
Other questions? Okay, we have had a number of people sign up to speak with us tonight. Each person will receive, let's check here, see where we're at. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak to us, and you will speak at the podium as people have done before this evening. I will call you up. The first 3 are Berta Romeo, Debbie Nicewander, and Maroon A. So please come up, say your name and the city that you are from, and then you'll have 3 minutes at the when you have 20 seconds left, you'll hear the buzzer, your light will go to yellow, and then you'll have 20 seconds left. Berta Romeo, okay, is not here, so go ahead and go to Debbie Nicewander.
Yeah, hello, my name is Debbie Nicewander, and yeah, I'm here to talk about the expulsion zone. I am still very much against the civil expulsion zone. I can live with the current expulsion zone, but I just kind of wanted to, we've been talking about expulsion a lot, and I just want to talk about inclusion a little bit. And in a social context is what I gave you in your packet. In social sciences, inclusion emphasizes equal opportunities and participation for everyone. This means actively removing barriers and providing accommodations to ensure everyone can be involved and benefit from the same experiences. So I wish we could maybe change our attention to inclusion maybe in the near future. And then on the second page, you're looking at the East Elia area, and I tried to list 12 different services, necessary services that we all need and utilize. And so is what I'd like to do, and I'm just like putting it out there, is I'd like to see 4 different areas, whereas maybe on the other side of I-5 could be one exclusion. Instead of excluding everybody from all of Ashland Street, we could just maybe expel somebody who's acting out on the other side of the freeway, or maybe expel somebody like in the Albertson Weimar area, and then maybe, expel someone who's acting out in the DHS Dollar Tree Plaza instead of expelling someone from all of Ashland Street. It seems a bit excessive to me. And then, like Counselor Kaplan said, I just included a copy of Medford, how they have the built-in variance built into their expulsion ordinance. And also, the appeal process, I like the way they kind of did that with your rights and whatnot, because the back of the expulsion ticket has to have an appeal process, so it'd be nice if we could work that out real nice and neat, where it's not all, jumbo garbo. And then we get to the parks. I'm officially filing an appeal to amend the parks ordinance to where the police don't have the ability to expel people from all parks. As our public restrooms are only in our parks.
Thank you.
So take that under consideration. Thank you.
We next have Maroon A, followed by Naba Goldfeder and Crystal Sheridan. Please tell us your name and the city in which you reside to start. Thank you.
Sorry, last time this messed me up and I got nervous. See this? I'm too tall for it. Hi, my name's Maroon. I've been living in Ashland for almost 8 years now. I come to you as an individual. My opinions are mine and not that of any organization I work or volunteer for. I'm here to speak on the ILIA and really ask if, in your hearts, is this really the right direction you want to go? Do you really think this is the right thing? I can assume most people today aren't here in favor of this. Last reading, no one came in favor of this. A handful of you attended the John Powell talk last night. You even canceled the study session to attend. He mentioned inclusion, othering, bridging, and coming together. I don't need to explain it. You guys were all there. But even after canceling, exclusion zones were still a topic for your evening. John Powell himself and panelists spoke out against exclusion zones and even mentioned the current ordinance being proposed today. Is after that talk, expanding our own ILIA really the best way to move forward? Is that really becoming more belonging and having less othering? This next part, I just want to be real and this isn't fear-mongering. I hope this is coming from a place and a person who really cares about humanity and their community and what we are facing with. It shouldn't be normal that when I think about the future in 20 years, that I can't imagine it. If we're dealing with the same shit, that's not normal for people of any generation. At the discussion at John Powell, he discussed about these things that we're really facing, like this dark enlightenment, this tech oligarch. I really, really, really encourage you to read what that means and what they are. They talked about this one quote from Peter Thiel about freedom and democracy not going hand in hand. Yes, he's a founder of PayPal, but he's also the co-founder of Palantir. Palantir is an AI tech base currently testing AI weapons we've never seen before in Gaza, 2 years since October 7th to this day, 2 years of the ongoing genocide. They are testing tech to identify where people are, assume that they're committing crimes, and bombing them. And we know that 80% of those deaths in Gaza have been civilians. It's tech that is abused by people, by evil, degenerate people, and they are already in our governments. It's not a thing when it. These people are influencing our policies, and they've been influencing our policies for decades. One of their biggest tools that they use is us othering each other. How we are passing policies for them. This right here, we're doing the work for them. And that is their biggest weapon. I don't even know where I was. People like this who talk about, like people who own and run our country, talking about the human race shouldn't live in 100 years, that we should bring eugenics back, and that the necessity to destroy our land and water. Oh, am I out of time?
Just now, yes.
I really hope you vote no on this. If you're going to go to a talk about
Thank you, Maroon. Thank you. Your time is done, Maroon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Naba Goldfeder, followed by Crystal Sheridan and Eric Novickis.
Hi, Council Mayor.
If you can pull that microphone
Yeah.
down, thank you.
Hi, Council Mayor. My name is Naba Goldfeder. I'm a street nurse in Ashland and live in Talent. The opinions are my own. I do have compassion for the pulls and challenges that you all face while serving Ashland. And I am asking you now to consider those in our community who are the most vulnerable and need the most care from all of us. Most of the people that are living on the streets have experienced multi-generational traumas that impact them greatly. And these neighbors need our services and not revolving doors of the court system, pushing our neighbors to the edges of town is not trauma-informed. It creates fear, more trauma, and it does not provide solutions for the long-term health of our community. It's just a Band-Aid. We're just moving people around and not giving them the opportunity for health. As far as solutions, housing is the #1 solution to end homelessness. It can come in a multitude of forms. I'm sure council understands those forms. They include subsidies, tiny house communities, conversions of buildings, group homes, shelters, and day centers. I ask council how many of those meeting the exclusions and getting excluded on a regular basis are effectively connected with healthcare, social services, and ongoing support from a trauma and violence-informed perspective. If we just continue to exclude over and over again, what are we doing to actually support people? I know that the chief said that services are being offered, but I really want to know how many people are feeling that that is being offered in a trauma and violence informed way, and if they feel safe accepting the kind of services that are being offered to them. And if they are not feeling safe, what alternatives do we have that we are providing, and how is council facilitating that within our community? I do believe it is our civic responsibility. I'm also concerned that the metrics of measuring the efficacy of the ILIA falls on those that are implementing the ordinance, and I ask for third-party metrics provided by those who have understanding of long-term impacts of the traumas of people experiencing homelessness, and I'd like to see transparency online so it is easier to see who's being excluded, how often, and what their impacts are. I'll read you a quote from the Brookings Institute. Evidence-based policy recommendations for reducing homelessness require root cause approaches, including reforming housing plans, scaling alternative crisis response models, stopping the jail to homelessness cycle, leveraging the capacity of place governance organizations, and taking a regional, data-driven approach to homelessness. We need to look for long-term care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will remind the audience again that there is no clapping during this proceeding. Crystal Sheridan is next, followed by Eric Novickis. Crystal Sheridan. Eric Novickis. Oh, that was Crystal.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. My name is Eric Novickis. I live in Ashland. I'm here tonight to speak on the impact to our police force, its morale, the public perception of our police force, and the makeup of our police force. Police do not have the skill set to address the complex issues of homelessness, addiction, trauma, and mental health. They are not social workers. It is destructive to the morale of our rank and file officers when they are constantly put in a position where they are addressing the issues of social poverty. This is a city where most officers cannot afford to live here, and they're being tasked with the job of further targeting and removing poor people. Police are not happy doing this work, and morale is low. The population they are targeting often faces trauma and responds poorly to police. Simply their presence is often a provocation. Officers who enter the force with high ideals and ethical interests do not last at this job. They are weeded out as they become demoralized by the reality of their job targeting poor people. Those who rise to the top and continue are the worst element in the force. The bully who can disassociate from the other stays on and becomes our police force. Community perception of our police force is also degraded when they are tasked with the job of targeting and removing a demographic of people. They are no longer seen as a servant of the people, but a tool of gentrification, exclusion, and class stratification. Morale, public perception, and the makeup of our police force is compromised by these type of policies. Policing is expensive and the city has hired 5 new police officers since the first exclusion zone was enacted. The chief has already stated that he wants more officers. This draws away from our social service funding. Ashland needs to move in a different direction. We need a Kahoot-style outreach team that works with the homeless population, works towards de-escalation, avoids unnecessary citation, criminalization, and helps direct people to services. We need to recognize the human element of the situation and work towards real holistic solutions. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would.
Okay,
I'm
you still
not
have
done. I
time.
still have 24 seconds. I would like to touch on the issue that Bob brought up, and I think you need to go over this clearly because it is clearly stated in the ordinance that you have to go to a judge to request the variance. And this creates a situation where people have to carry papers to show that they've gotten the variance from the judge and someone's coming up to them, show me your papers, reality. And that's not the kind of reality that I want to live in my future.
Thank you. Kate Hartzell, followed by Noah Wertheiser.
I'm Kate Hartzell. I live in Ashland. I wanted to call attention to information that I sent to you on Sunday on behalf of several of us working on this issue. It asked specifically that you insert language, and we offered some potential language to ensure that staff comes back on a regular basis to give you feedback. It's already been part of the discussion that the data metrics that were presented to you don't justify what's happening here, or certainly all of them. And so it makes sense to go ahead and ask that that information be come back to you. And in doing that, you can cultivate and ask questions about what's being brought back to you and perhaps refine the kind of metrics that are being used to determine whether this is getting you the result that you believe that you want. We did send you a list of the kind of information that we were interested in. In one of my previous careers, I worked with a group of loggers and environmentalists on the ground projects in the forest. And one of the ways that we were able to do that was that we worked together, each constituency bringing the kinds of things that they believed were important to measure because of what they were afraid the impacts would be. We put those into metrics and we measured them together in a collaborative effort to find out whether what our beliefs about what was going to happen was really what happened. So what we're recommending is that kind of multi-stakeholder process, citizens working together with you and the police force to do that. The variance language, I'm told that the previous iteration of this allowed variances in a much easier way. I reiterate, or I echo your concern, Councillor Kaplan, that you're asking people to come back into the court. Hopefully this isn't in one of your zones. To demonstrate by clear and convincing evidence that they have a reason that they have to get into one of the zones. It puts an additional burden on the burden that you've already created. And I just want you to look at that, not necessarily inserting an or, but really looking at what metrics did the police department bring back to you to ask or to justify making it harder to get a variance when you're locking your city off to people who need services in it. I was handing out leaflets on the Shakespeare bricks last night. I was confronted and told that I was going to be trespassed. And honestly, I went through a filter of like, what zone am I in? What misdemeanors could they do? Could they trespass me from all of downtown? Maybe that's what you want. But I was out there leafleting guests at the Belonging event. It shouldn't happen that that's how you're treating citizens, where they have to kind of wonder whether they're going to fall into extrajudicial consequences.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Noah Wertheiser. I live in Ashland. First, I'd like to state that while I serve on 2 city-appointed committees, the statements that I am about to make are my own. When I was 15 years old, my grandfather taught me to drive a stick shift in his 1949 cherry red Ford pickup truck. It smelled of oil and leather and gasoline, and to this day, it's one of the happiest moments of my life. I was a natural, at least in the empty parking lot on flat terrain where there was little to no pressure and very few cars. But the moment that I found myself on a hill or at a stop sign, my nerves would catch up with me and I'd pop the clutch, or I'd hit the gas too hard, or I'd stomp on the brake and I'd just kill the engine. It happened so often that it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'd approach every stop already anxious about getting it right, and that tension would cause me to overcorrect. Too much gas one time, too much brake the next. From that experience, I learned 2 lessons that I still practice every day. The first is subtlety is important. Second is that there's no single pedal you can press to make a complex machine do what you want. I'm no longer afraid of driving stick shift on a hill because I understand how that system works. Homelessness and its most visible and painful companion, untreated mental illness, is a challenge that can't be solved by pressing down on one pedal. Law enforcement is an essential part of addressing these issues, but there are social services and community partnerships that matter too. Programs in restorative justice, diversion, and outreach courts have shown real success precisely because they combine those elements rather than just relying on one. Moving disruptive behavior from one neighborhood and into another doesn't solve the problem, it just deepens it and sweeps it under the rug. Although I know many of you are determined to pass the ordinance tonight, I ask that you consider at least postponing. Take the time to explore combinations of solutions that don't just move the problem aside, but that actually help solve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes our public testimony. Are there any further questions of staff? Johan?
I just wanted to add a point of clarification for Councilor Kaplan's question, just to make it easier if you do want to offer an amendment. I think where the confusion happened is Section D saying any other variance condition under Section F. So I think, obviously, the amendment to add an or after subsection C is simple, but if you wanted to add an amendment to Section F variance to make it more clear, I would suggest the following. A court of competent jurisdiction may, at its discretion, grant an additional variance to an expelled person at any time during the period of expulsion if the person demonstrates a need by clear and convincing evidence, period. Variants are applied automatically if, colon. And then it just kind of re-enumerates the discussion that council had. I think the 2 different sections just made it a little confusing, but they are intended to apply automatically, and then additional variances can be granted if a judge finds a need. So I'd be happy to caption that language for the
When we get to that point.
if it became necessary.
Great. So Chief, I know we've had a number of questions this evening about access to social services, and I'm wondering if you, I know from being on the Public Safety Coordinating Council that there is a deflection program that has started in Medford and is now moving out to the other jurisdictions. Can you talk to us about our participation in that process and how you see that unfolding in the next, in the near future?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Jackson County, like most but not all counties, is participating in the deflection program. The deflection program is being run jointly by the Medford Police and the county. And at first, it was determined by the Deflection Governance Board, which I, or my deputy chief, am now a part of, that they were going to start off very focused. And lessons learned in other jurisdictions include that if you start off with too wide a net, you cannot keep up with the demand. So you start off with a small net, and then as your ability grows, your offering grows. So originally it was only offered to the Medford Police and the Sheriff's Department, and specifically it was only offered to the Medford Police Livability Team officers to invite people to participate in the Sheriff's Department Greenway deputies. Since then, other departments, including APD, have been invited, and we have joined. And we I just got the most recent statistic from Counselor Kaplan that APD has referred 2 people, 1 successful, 1 unfortunately not successful, if I heard you correctly. We have similarly narrowly focused it just through our CAP officers so far, but because of our staffing challenges, our CAP officers have not been doing CAP stuff. They've been doing patrol stuff, so we haven't had as robust offering of that opportunity. And I'm happy to explore widening that so that more officers can offer it to more people. It's a nuanced and complicated program, and it's only one of many, many off-ramps from the criminal justice system. There's lots of off-ramps if you do catch a charge and you actually do want to better yourself and get substance abuse support. But we're at the beginning of this offering through the Ashland Police Department, and I'm happy to explore expanding it as much as we can without over-offering it prematurely.
Thank you. That's helpful. We had just received a briefing on it at the Public Safety Coordinating Council, and so and I knew that we had started to participate in that and wanted to have a little bit more detail. Any further questions, Councilor Hanson?
Hi, Chief. Last time at first reading, I asked for some data on how often officers are able to include social service when they're doing their work. And I'm not quite sure exactly how that will, land in a report. I know from the little I know from the Jackson County Services that when they are available, they have staffing and availability. They're eager to come to whatever community calls upon them. So I'm curious, moving forward, what kind of visibility we can have as council and as a community, and how often Ashland Police Department has included social services when working with a call. I don't know what you call them. Is there what's a reasonable way for us to really see how often and what services are working and not in our work? Is it a report? Is it anecdotal? But for some story, I would like us to be able to come back to council and have a report, whether it be numbers or whether it's a narrative that's in your end of the day documentation from officers or whatever. But what's reasonable for us? And I want also the Ashland Police Department and our social service partners to be able to look at this for funding reasons and for all the humanitarian reasons and all that. But I know that this is happening. I don't know how often it's happening, but how do you convey that to us? How do you come back to council and let us know how much you're reaching out to social services when you're out there doing your work?
I think it's a great question, and I don't know that there's any super easy way to quantify that. If you would give me some time to ponder on that, at the very least, we can come back with anecdotal stories. And one thing that I will agree all day with Noah and his stick shift driving abilities is that one pedal is always not the right answer. And so
Right.
one social service is always not the right answer.
Right.
So I agree that info has to be captured.
Right.
If you can allow me the grace that I don't have a good answer for you right now, but I will work on that.
Please, I think that would be great.
Mm-hmm. And as a reminder, counselors, we all have been invited to offer data collection requests, and I'm assuming that will come back to us as a list that says this is what staff is planning to bring forward at the quarterly elements, so that we can see if there's anything that the council wants to add to that. Is that correct?
It is correct, and Councilor Kaplan reminded me of some important information earlier today, and that was a couple of motions and passages that kind of set the stage for bringing back data on the number of cases qualifying for expulsion and actual expulsions. And I'm happy to try to bring back anything, and I I will do my best as I report back. If this passes tonight, it won't go into effect until November 7th, and so the first quarter would really be December, January, February. So bringing something back at the end of February, beginning of April. I agree that this is kind of new territory for us, and I would suggest that we not try to get into a massive level of specificity about what data we're trying to bring back until we know exactly how this is going to play out. I think that I've got a very good framework from the last meeting to give me an idea of what council is wanting to see. And as we collectively get into this, we can certainly fine tune it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kaplan? Oh.
That's the same thing.
Okay. Other questions of staff? Okay, the floor is open for a motion. Councillor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve Ordinance 3273 with amendments and amend proposed Ordinance 3273, Section 10.120.020, subsection A1F to read ORS 475C.377 to reflect the current Oregon statute.
Second.
Councillor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. I believe I've repeatedly demonstrated that I approach these very complex issues objectively and through the lens of balance and compassion, to be as informed as possible and striving for fairness for everyone in our community. With respect to this issue, some behaviors, however, must be addressed through accountability for both the very few individuals for which this ordinance may apply, as well as and especially for those implementing and enforcing our shared standards. Utilizing the many contributions from across the spectrum of viewpoints on this issue, I believe this council and staff have worked extremely hard to ensure that any implemented measures are more than reasonable and are appropriately monitored for efficacy and accountability while respecting everyone's rights and dignity. As noted by others previously, those that were able to attend the John A. Powell event last night will recall that we learned how Dr. Powell teaches and promotes a concept known as targeted universalism, which is a mechanism through which we can pursue universal goals like safety, dignity, inclusivity, and fairness for everyone, while simultaneously recognizing that every individual faces different barriers and therefore require targeted approaches to ensure everyone can reach the same result. This means helping those who face extraordinarily difficult challenges while firmly and gracefully confronting those actions which erode public trust and safety. Protecting rights and the rule of law is essential, and fair rules that ensure safety for all do in fact support fairness for all. Finally, true inclusion means respecting differing views and engaging in honest, thoughtful, respectful dialogue. I will be supporting this ordinance. I hope those who disagree with it will take the time to understand the strongest points of the arguments they disagree with, so that we can find common ground and strengthen our community. I will absolutely commit to continuing to do the same. Thank you.
Councillor Blue?
Thank you. This ordinance is about accountability, fairness, and community safety. Ordinance 3273 creates a civil court-supervised process that allows a municipal judge to issue a limited expulsion order, similar in concept to a civil restraining order. We all understand that when someone is being harassed or abused, the law provides a civil order of protection. A judge can restrict contact before a trial concludes because we recognize the need to keep people safe in the meantime. The enhanced law enforcement area works from that same principle. It provides a legal mechanism for the court to temporarily separate an individual who has repeatedly violated the law in a specific area while preserving full access to housing, food, medical care, employment, and services. Without this tool, law enforcement and the courts are left with an all-or-nothing choice. Either do nothing or pursue criminal charges. This ordinance introduces a middle ground, a fair, transparent, civil process with hearings, appeals, variances, and the opportunity for revocation. There's been a lot of disinformation spread about this measure. Claims that people won't be able to live in their homes or that this criminalizes homelessness. Those claims are simply false. The ordinance explicitly states that camping cannot qualify, and no one is ever barred from their home or from accessing food or essential services. And I want to acknowledge something difficult but true. At one of our recent meetings, our police chief was physically attacked inside this very building by someone opposed to this ordinance. That incident, understandably, left many supporters feeling unsafe attending public meetings. The absence of visible support does not mean this community is silent. It means many now fear that coming here to express it could put them at risk. Ultimately, this ordinance is about restoring accountability and protecting the public spaces that belong to everyone. So I ask, what is the alternative? That we as a community simply accept people violating the law and the commons over and over and over again without consequence? Accountability and compassion are not opposites. This ordinance ensures both. It upholds the rule of law, provides due process, and maintains access to services while keeping our shared spaces safe for everyone.
Councillor Kaplan?
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to offer an amendment to section 10.120.050F as follows.
Go ahead.
I'd like to revise the first, the number 1, to say a court of competent jurisdiction may, at its discretion, grant additional variances to those listed in 10.120.040 to an expelled person at any time during the period of expulsion if the person demonstrates by clear and convincing evidence. The rest of the sentence is as is. That's number 1. And second is to insert the word "or" at the end of C so that this list of 4 becomes optional. What's the word? Anyway, it's "or" instead of "and."
Yes, singular.
Singular.
A list of singular items.
Instead of 4 necessarily to comply. So,
right.
Okay. That's my motion. That's my amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councillor Kaplan?
I think this is, we've established that this is what is intended. I appreciate that. So I appreciate the drafting advice to get it right.
Councillor Dale?
I believe it's completely appropriate, and I appreciate the amendment.
There any further discussion on the amendment? Roll call, please, Alyssa, on the amendment.
Duquesne?
Yes.
Kaplan?
Yes.
Bloom?
Yes.
Dale?
Yes.
Sherrill?
Yes.
Hanson?
No.
Councillor Duquesne, did you, I have you on my list?
Yes,
We're back to the main motion.
Okay. But I want to say that I do appreciate the amendment to the motion and the work that's been put into it. But something that I wanted to say, we have been doing this since February, and when I think about the ELIA itself and our first CAP West and where we are now in CAP East, our unhoused community has increased. And my experience working with our unhoused community on the night lawn, from then to now, I appreciate all of our volunteers that have worked so hard. I appreciate working with Aura and them taking care of the storage for our unhoused. They're doing a great job. And speaking of Aura, I've spoken with Dan so many times. There's success stories over there, how they work hand in hand with our unhoused community and with the community that lives there. I look at the 2200 Ashland Street. When we got there, it was a disaster, yes, and now we're there. I look forward to us being on time, and I believe we are on time, for our doors to open in November, and looking at the weather. Having an all-weather shelter has been needed since I've been here, and that's almost 20 years. So we have somewhere to house people when it's too hot, when it's too cold, when it's too smoky. And inside that building, we have 8 to 10 offices, and something that the ad hoc committee talked about. The first ad hoc committee was using those offices to work with regional partners. And I've heard regional partners mentioned this evening. And this is an opportunity for us to meet people where they are and not leave them there. And that is quoting Dr. Powell. We don't have to invent the wheel. It's already happening, and this has been brought up more than once. So I look forward to meeting people where they are. We talked about deflection court. I look forward to that conversation in a study session. So where we are right now, I support this motion moving forward, and I look forward to moving forward. This is not the end. This is the Elia and.
Councillor Sherrill?
Yeah, thanks to the community for the feedback and all the time that was put in. Those messages don't go unread, I promise. And thanks, Chief, for having the compassion in the red line copy over and over again. I think you bargained with good faith to make this better. It's not perfect, but I think it's good. And I just wanted to say that we're really entrusting a lot of responsibility in your officers, and we trust them, and we're going to support them, but we're also watching. Okay, that's not a threat to the force. It's that we trust you to go out and do good police work. And for comments that were made earlier, the police force is not usually trained to the social worker status, but I see the police force often in this community, and I think a lot of what they are doing is untrained, uncertified social work to the best of their ability. And I've seen some instances in real life lately that I was proud of our police force. So we're going to be watching them, and hopefully they can use really good judgment as we implement this starting next month. I plan to support this.
Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. I too went and saw Professor Powell speak last night, and one of the things that I came away with was when he said that when you see something, say something. And to me, this is enough. This is enough. We have an Elia. We have a business community that's spoken out. We have a neighborhood community that's spoken out. We have an unhoused community that's spoken out. We have city workers that are working their hardest, doing their best. We are all in this together. And although I don't personally think that this is a truly grievous error that we're making, but I do think this is enough. This enough is enough. And we need to start building bridges, and we need to start handing out hands to lift people up. And I want our community to get through these times. I think it's gonna get harder for everybody. And I'm just heartfelt. Everybody's in a situation. And to me, this is enough. We don't need this. Due process, slowing things down, I get it. But I'm still not convinced after interviewing lawyers and community members and police and activists and volunteers. I still don't think that this is the right thing to do. I don't think that it's constitutionally going to hold up given the right circumstances. I think we're liable. And I don't like what it does for our community. I mean, we can do better. So for all those reasons, I didn't support it last time. I'm not going to support it this time. We have an Elia. Just for those that are curious, we have an Elia. It's there. I will not be supporting this.
Councillor Kaplan.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm not going to be supporting this either, but I appreciate that. And the reason I'm not supporting this goes back to our first discussion, almost a year ago now, when Chief, when you brought this an earlier version, which was much more draconian, as you've said yourself. I never felt that the data were really there to support the effectiveness of this sort of thing. I didn't think the data were there to support a second Elia, and I don't think the data are there to support these changes. But I appreciate the efforts, the work that you put into this, and that our city attorney put into it to really clarify it and make sure that it's as kind, I suppose, or as non-intrusive as possible and as fair as possible. And I sat with Judge Mulkins today and talked with him about how he will actually be able to carry it out. And that's when we kind of identified this last item. So I appreciate all the work that you put into it. I'm looking forward to the data. I think I'm sure I'll have some comments about it and some suggestions for adding additional perspectives on it, because I'm really looking to answer this. The basic question is, are we just moving things around rather than solving a problem? So thanks very much. I won't be supporting this, but I want to explain why.
Roll call, please, Alyssa.
Sherrill?
Yes.
Dale?
Yes.
Bloom?
Yes.
Kaplan?
No.
Duquesne?
Yes.
Hanson?
No.
Motion pass.
Thank you. We have 2 more contracts on our agenda this evening. Thank you, Chief. We have the approval of a construction contract with Carter and Company Incorporated for the North Mountain Avenue Overlay Phase 1 project, PW 2021-03.
So tonight you'll be acting as the contracting board to ensure the city has properly conducted the process for these contracts that Scott will outline.
So just a reiteration, council is being asked to approve a construction contract with Carter and Company for the North Mountain Overlay Phase 1. Phase 1 overlay project is from Hersey Street to the interstate, and it will consist of pavement rehabilitation, sidewalk infill, ADA ramp upgrades, marking, signage, striping, and pedestrian safety improvements, specifically there, a crossing to the nature center, and some minor improvements to the bridge over Bear Creek as part of this phase. Since the project was expected to exceed $250,000, you're required to do a formal competitive sealed bid process under Ashland Municipal Code and State Code. And so we developed an invitation to bid that was approved by the legal department. It was released on Oregon Buys, which is the state procurement website that allows all contractors, vendors, suppliers to access this information. It was also posted in the Daily Journal or advertised in the Daily Journal of Commerce as part of that process. We opened bids on the 23rd. We received 3 responsive bids, and when I mean responsive, they all had the required addendum language, the bid bond security information, and all of that as part of that process. Carter and Company provided the low responsive bid as part of that process. And with that, it is the council's discretion to approve or not approve the contract itself for $3.5 million. And as far as next steps, we would, if council approves, execute the construction contract. We would coordinate with the contractor to develop a formal schedule of construction activities, a start date, notice to proceed, and when the project would end based on the calendar time allotted towards it. And then we would also develop pertinent public notifications that would be sent to residents along that corridor, but also posted on the city website. I think I mentioned this previously, is one of the things we've done on our roadway rehabilitation projects is kind of shifted construction schedule of activities. So we are looking at doing these hardscape improvements in fall and winter, and then the actual asphalt work in spring, and be done with those activities before fire season is in full swing. So we don't have significant traffic closures and issues related to that during fire season. And with that, I'll answer questions.
Councilor Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Scott. We talked a lot about this in the Transportation Advisory Committee. We talked a lot about protected bike lanes up and down North Mountain. I didn't see it in the bid packet. What's our status on that?
So this section is not the section that's wide enough to allow a fully protected bike lane because of the median island that runs through it. So it'll have your standard bike lane facility similar to what it is now, but we will have green paint on that bike facility similar to Ashland Street. The section, phase 2 portion of the project from Hersey Street to East Main, which the council approved the removal of street side parking along that section to facilitate the installation of a buffered bike lane. That will happen in phase 2. So that whole section will get that buffered bike facility similar to what Ashland Street has. And then the intermediate phase is Central Oregon Pacific Railroad
crossing on Mountain needs to be improved to the Corp standard, and we've entered into the agreement to authorize them to move forward with doing that, and they handle that activity, and we reimburse them construction cost dollars to do that improvement.
Okay, so we're getting the green paint you can see from space.
Yes.
Great. And and you said the bridge improvements, it's a little tight there when you have two cars and a bike. How is that going to shake out? What kind of improvement are we going to make there to?
So there'll
make it
be
work?
sidewalk connection and markings over the bridge, and then guardrail, handrail improvements along the bridge section itself.
Okay.
Will be done, yes.
Cool, and one more. We don't always take low bid, right?
You're actually required to, by the ORS, to take the lowest responsive bid.
Okay, so, all right, great. I forgot that. Tell us about Carter and Company history with City of Ashland.
So this is the first job that they've submitted a bid on for the City of Ashland. They've done major construction work for the Oregon Department of Transportation previously, but this is the first contractual agreement that we've worked with them on. I know that their sub doing the asphalt work is Knife River, who has done these things in whole for us previously.
Okay.
And they will have a subcontractor do the ADA improvements and the sidewalk infill, all of which will be required to meet the standard developed in the design and the specifications.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Sherrill?
Can you go back a slide and a half, maybe? One more? In the residential areas there, are there going to be, do you foresee any moratoriums on development or curb cutting or sidewalk, asphalt cutting for repairs or sewer lines or water infrastructure from development we're going to expect during the same time frame?
So in the past, we did have the council adopt a moratorium. You would have to do a half-street improvement. So what we do from the public works side is we have a more robust T-cut structure for any sort of infrastructure that goes in after the fact. We haven't installed a moratorium that would either eliminate or severely restrict development going in there and adding infrastructure utilities. Along this corridor, I'm fairly confident that we're not going to have much of an issue because there isn't much of a connection, along this to private development. There's a few houses that have frontage utility access, but the rest of it is off that mainline network.
Copy, thank you.
And then just to reiterate that, one of the things we're doing on the phase 2 is there's a water line along that section that is very shallow and end of useful life kind of determination, so that will be replaced. So we've done the utility coordination with others. Avista, you probably noticed, was out there for, I would say, multiple years doing improvements along that corridor as part of this. Our utility coordination effort with Electric, Avista, phone, cable, AFN, all of that happens kind of behind the scenes.
Thank you, Scott.
Further questions? Councillor Duquesne?
Thank you, Mayor. So Scott, I'm looking, you mentioned phase 2. So when I look under fiscal impact, can you tell me the total amount for this?
We're probably looking at another $4.5 million for that phase 2 total contract. So that would include the construction and potentially the construction administration. I think we had an original project value of about $8 to $10 million based on the CIP for both phases.
So this money is coming from the CIP?
It comes from food and beverage tax allocation to the street fund. The food and beverage allocation to the street fund covers the debt service that we institute for these projects in total.
And we have this money already in the street fund?
It's
or not?
allocated
It's
to the street
allocated
fund,
to.
yeah. And so we will incur debt in this biennium, and the food and beverage that is allocated to the street fund will pay that debt. It's the similar structure to what we authorized, or the council authorized, for Ashland Street.
When we got the big green line.
Yep, correct.
Any final questions? The floor is open for a motion. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the construction contract with Carter and Company, Inc. for the North Mountain Avenue overlay. Phase 1 project for a contract amount not to exceed $3,593,271.50. And further move to enact a 5-year street cut moratorium to the affected street section.
So Counselor Hanson, I think when you said the number, you put a 3 in where there's a 1. So I just want to make sure that we're all thinking it's the same number.
$3,593,271.50.
Which one is it?
Point of clarification, Scott, the amount on the slide is different from the council packet.
Oh.
That's what I'm looking at. Which of those two numbers is the one we want?
Hang on.
Probably the one in the packet.
593. It's the one in the packet. I just
Okay,
couldn't have error.
Great. So the first reading is fine.
Yes.
Is there a second? Counselor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is, the great work of our city staff, keeping ahead of maintenance issues and making improvements to our transportation system network. We have an opportunity here to do good work, and we have the money set aside for it. Glad to see that there's pedestrian and bike improvements, and that will translate to more improvements marching up Mountain Street as we go up the hill. I'm glad to know that this is going to happen out of fire season, and I appreciate the consciousness of staff moving forward with this project, and I support it 100%. Thank you.
Counselor Kaplan. Any further discussion? Counselor Dale.
Mayor, with your permission, may I ask a quick question to Counselor Hanson
Yes.
relative to his motion? So, Counselor, I absolutely do support this as well. I just am a little concerned about the moratorium and would wonder if you would be interested in either withdrawing the motion and making it without that moratorium, or if that was your intent to specifically have that moratorium on there. And the reason is for flexibility for future growth and so forth, and decisions, and we can always address it.
Well, I'm taking that at staff recommendation.
Yeah, that was.
So I'm happy to ask Scott if the process allows to elaborate a little bit.
That was an editing error from a holdover and a copy and paste that I didn't catch. Yeah.
So
I would not at this time recommend having the 5-year street cut moratorium placed on that. Like I said, we handle it through kind of an upgrade in the ODOT standards through a larger enhanced T-cut trench for any sort of repair that goes on for a utility infrastructure cut.
Well, I appreciate that catch, and I'd like to withdraw my motion and make a new one.
Okay, go ahead.
Based on staff recommendations, I like that. All right. I move to approve the construction contract with Carter and Company, Inc. for the North Mountain Avenue overlay, Phase 1 project for a contract not to exceed $3,593,271.50.
Is there a second?
I'll gladly second that.
Okay. Counselor Hanson.
Yeah. Thank you, Counselor Dale. Thank you, Scott.
Counselor Dale.
Counselor Hanson, thank you for the flexibility.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Alyssa.
Hanson,
Yes.
Duquesne,
Yes.
Kaplan.
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Dale,
Yes.
Sherrill.
Yes.
Motion pass.
And next, we have approval of personal services contract for construction administration services for the North Mountain Avenue overlay, Phase 1 project, PW 2021-03.
Deja vu. So this is a request for the council to authorize a personal services contract with Dow for the construction administration of the construction phase of the North Mountain project. And construction administration involves inspection and insurance to conformance with the engineering design and specification, responding to contractor requests for information, developing any sort of design changes and things like that, as built after the project, all transpire under the construction administration contract. Again, when you have something that's potentially valued over the $250,000, you have to do a formal process, which for engineering is a qualifications-based selection process. This document was reviewed by legal, advertised statewide, and this goes back years because we advertise these types of contracts with 3 phases. So Dowell was awarded the preliminary and final engineering structure, and within that solicitation, we also outlined the 3rd phase, which is construction administration. So when you respond, you know your ability can be up to 3 phases for that contractual work or not at the city's discretion. The council approved the first contract with Dowell for the engineering phase in 2022. And now we're requesting that you authorize the CA contract now to join in with the construction phase moving forward. We would execute the contract and then begin coordination with Dowell and the contractor on ensuring compliance with the design and specifications as part of the overall process.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Dale?
Thank you. Just for the record, Scott, very briefly, I assume that all of the financial mechanics of this is the same as what we just discussed under our CIP under this particular project.
Correct. It's all part of the food and beverage allocation to cover that. Will all be encapsulated in that debt.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Sherrill?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I want to get up to speed on this. Sorry if this is an obvious answer, but are we required by, did I hear we're required by law to have an administrator manage this?
We're not on this required by law. We just don't have the resource time to allocate it from a staffing basis. So that's why we hire out to help us. Just on the same thing with the design, we don't have the staff resource to house multiple engineering disciplines to perform that work. It's better to contract when needed than to have.
Totally, yeah. I see that completely, especially with all the civil engineering that would go into this. But as far as like administering the construction contract, can you just, I'm not like questioning your decision to do this. I'm just asking, like, help me understand what we're paying them $500,000 to do.
So this includes, basically on-site all day throughout the duration of the project, having an inspector from Dowell, take daily logs, take photographs, coordinate construction activities, coordinate that schedule, make sure that the traffic control is installed correctly, be that eyes and ears on the ground, daily throughout the project, coordinating potential design changes with the engineering side of things as part of that overall process. And then we have our project manager who comes in, in portions of that throughout the process overall. So it's kind of a team effort, but from a resource standpoint, we outsource that to them directly to manage that day to day.
Copy. And then your team still has oversight, like you're still doing final inspections?
We still have the final say-so on things as part of it. So if there's a recommended change, it would be at our discretion to thumbs up or thumbs down that, correct?
Okay, copy. Thanks.
Councillor Hanson?
Yeah, great question. I appreciate that. The packet says it's construction over 7 months, but what is it really going to be, you think?
There's weather dependencies starting in winter.
And that's why we said 7, but what is it really going to be?
That's the expected contract duration. But we could potentially have weather days that would create a delay that would add additional time on to the end of the contract. And that's an allowance under the specifications we use.
If you're a neighbor and you hear 7 months as like the estimate, I'm sure they would like to know, like, really when the rubber meets the road, is it really going to be like a 4-month project?
And that's one of the first steps is having that contractor, Carter and Company, develop their formal construction schedule. So they have a contract time, they have to complete it, but they also develop a contract schedule that fits in with that for all of those activities. So we will know, a high level on the start date of what they plan to do, when they plan to do it, and how long it will take.
Okay. I have so many questions about traffic control and how it would affect the neighborhood. But I just really quickly, is there going to be any kind of rerouting around that section by the bridge to the other side of the highway and around? Do you have any
There'll be some discretion for the contractor, but they will have to allow access. So on that side, if they're doing paving, they're probably paving one section at a time and then doing a shift of traffic over, since it is divided by the median most of the way. So they will shift people over and back throughout while they pave. So they'll always have one lane of traffic open.
It's going to be a dance.
It'll be a logistic issue.
Yes.
And we'll definitely be working closely with the contractor. And the previous go-around, we had our emergency manager, Kelly Burns, involved in the Ashland Street. So he had the contractor contact information and things like that. So if there was any sort of emergency event that came up where he was involved, he knew who to contact to help facilitate any sort of resolution.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? The floor is open for a motion. Councilor Dale.
Take it? Sure. I move to approve a contract for construction engineering services with Dow for amount not to exceed, my document here, $492,206.40. Principal project tasks in the amount of $468,456.40 and contingencies in the amount of $23,750.
Second.
Councilor Dale.
No, thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Sherrill. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Alyssa.
Sherrill,
Yes.
Dale,
Yes.
Bloom,
Yes.
Kaplan.
Yes.
Duquesne,
Yes.
Hanson.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. So we've had a packed agenda tonight. We've had a lot of big issues that have required a lot of discussion, and we have heard from a number of our community members, and we've wanted to make sure that they had enough time to express their thinking. But what that has meant, unfortunately, Chad, is that we do not have time to take up the climate and energy action plan today. That is also a very important conversation, and it requires more than 9 minutes of our time. We want to make sure that we give it the same amount of consideration that we have given the other issues that have been on the agenda this evening. So I apologize, but that we are not going to be able to get to that tonight. Sabrina, we can get that on to the next agenda? We have to, yes. So with that, city manager report.
So, Councilmember Bloom, if you can just refrain from packing up while I go through this report, that would be great. So some things to take note, our event partnership grant program launched in October 2024, and to date, we've awarded over $130,000 across 20 grants, funding 25 events that are estimated at bringing in approximately 6,000 visitors. So good work on that to city staff. 2200 work continues on the severe weather shelter building. We are still estimating completion by mid to late November for that building. So moving forward with that. And then we have our last coffee and conversation next Tuesday at 2:30 in North Mountain Park. Who's going to be there? All right, Councilmember Dale and Councilmember Hanson. We'll have city staff there as well. We did.
Wait a second. Is it warm weather or cold weather snacks?
We will determine that day of.
Okay, game
So,
time decision.
that is most important. We will have some sort of beverage there to be determined. Friday, October 10th, 2 to 6 at Fire Station 2, we will have tours, fire safety education, and community connection during Fire Prevention Week. And then we also have the good news that we've moved from high to moderate with our fire dangers. That's always great to hear with that. And then we do have our Return of the Salmon Family Field Day, October 18th from 10 to 2. That is free at North Mountain Park. So we invite you all to join us there. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councilor Duquesne?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for the city manager regarding the islands on Ashland Street. I see that the shrubs are coming out and people are asking me what's going on, what is it going to look like? And I know that it was mentioned about hardening the islands, and just to echo what was brought up to me earlier today is that, you know, we already don't have any trees and greenery on the south side, and now we're taking what we have out. So can you let our constituents know what that's going to look like? And
Yep.
do we
So
keep the trees?
The trees will remain. The rest of the greenery is going to be removed. We'll be doing some decorative hardscaping. So this will cut down on watering costs along the median as well as staff time to go through and maintain those medians. So you'll see this kind of continue throughout work down Siskiyou Boulevard and North Mountain as we do street improvements to the medians. Some medians will be removed, but we'll also be adjusting those so that we have less expense around the medians moving forward.
So when you say harden and some will be removed, what does harden look like?
So there'll be like large boulders and decorative rocks put in.
And trees. And what is going to be removed? What islands are you saying are going to be removed?
That I don't know yet. So that'll be part of the discussion when Siskiyou Boulevard comes around for development or redoing. So one of the things I have asked the Public Art Committee to take a look at is transitioning some of our public art to our medians to add art along for not only pedestrians, but also because we have a lot of car travel throughout the city.
Okay, we'll see.
Councilor Kaplan?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Sabrina, we had a comment today from one of our community members about deer, and I know that a number of people have been talking about that recently, and I shared some information about it, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago. Can you talk to us about a little bit about how you're thinking about that, or what may be in store to address that increasing issue?
Yeah, I've been in contact with Fish and Wildlife. They have deer jurisdiction, I guess, I would say, to kind of what our options are. They have stated they do not support, birth control for deer. And, we're not the only city that faces this. Grants Pass, Jacksonville, they also have similar issues with overzealous deer, large deer populations. And so I have requested that they maybe find time to come speak to us early next year during a study session to talk about kind of their opinion on deer. I don't think we have the expertise on staff to kind of guide council through options, so we're going to need to rely on some suggestions from our partners there.
Yeah, follow-up question. So if it's their responsibility, their jurisdiction, do they do population counts? Are they keeping data on what's going on at all? Or, if it's their issue, what are they doing to actually understand what the scope of the issue is in our town?
That's a great question for them. I do not know.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. We have 4 minutes for any updates from council liaisons. Councilor Bloom?
Yeah, I'll just be quick. Just talk about LOC a little bit. That was this weekend. It was a really great experience. There's some really cool development stuff that's happening in Portland around the OMSI district. Very, I don't know, for me, very futurist, cool, something I would imagine as a kid that it would look. The OMSI district. Yeah, we can chat about it if you want offline. That, and then we did a tour of Lake Oswego and what they're doing around parks and recreation and livability. And their city manager is a former city manager of Ashland here, and they're doing some really cool things. They have a municipal golf course that, of course, was losing money, and they're turning that around by being really creative with what they do with recreation, specifically around indoor recreation and the youth, which is really helping the community. So yeah, I think that's something we should, obviously we'll all be talking about these kind of things further down the road. Look forward to it.
And I attended as well, and I went to Gresham. We divided and conquered and saw a lot of really interesting urban development where we've got mixed use and then childcare. A lot of the things that we're seeing that we need and that we're hearing from the community, commercial kitchen, rented by the hour, cold storage, a variety of things that we've talked about. So coming back with some ideas about what that could look like as well in certain parts of our community. So Councilor Sherrill.
Not a committee or commission, but on the same vein, I spent the weekend in Portland with the Inc. Dev committee from Northwest Arkansas that came into Portland, and a group of about 50 infill housing developers from all over the world walked around different neighborhoods in Portland and looked at cool new housing types and some housing types that are directly related to new legislation that's just passed. And then we had a new urbanist talk about walkability. There was just a lot of really good stuff. So good ideas for another time. I'd like to chat about.
Councillor Hanson?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to point out that since we last were all together here in this room, we had a race coming off of Mount Ashland. The Ashland Mountain Challenge happened, brought a couple thousand people to Ashland, and you saw a lot more bikes in town that weekend. It was very successful, and it was on the heels of the opening of the Mount Ashland A-Line Jump Line, which was a partnership between Rogue Valley Mountain Biking Association and a bunch of funders, and it's another destination type of bike infrastructure thing that's happening up on Mount Ashland that's bringing more people to town.
Great. Councillor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, very briefly, I just wanted to mention on behalf of the Chamber, a liaison for the Chamber of Commerce, and just a phenomenal annual dinner event last week, recognizing a lot of business owners, and just really just a shout out to Sandra and Dana and Catherine and Bonnie for putting on, and others for putting on just a wonderful event to showcase our economic vitality. It was a really nice event.
Great. Councillor Bloom.
Yeah, real quick, I should have included it, but I've got 1 minute, I'm going to say it. Being in Portland with my young family, 4-year-old and 8-month-old, we walked around at night. It was perfectly safe. There is no war zone. And bless Portland, it's an incredibly beautiful city and the best I've seen in a decade.
And we will close out with a thank you to Councillor Duquesne and the organizers from So Pride for a fantastic weekend celebration. And with that, the floor is open for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.